My wife's affair was exposed by her own parents. Now they want to disown her and leave me their $2 million inheritance. Should I accept it? My wife, Nicole, 27F, and I, 29M, had been married for a year before I filed for divorce after discovering she was cheating on me with one of her coworkers. Interestingly, it was my in-laws that revealed the affair to me and advised me to file for divorce as soon as possible. Nicole is the sole child of her rich parents, who run a large pharmaceutical firm. Nicole and I met on a dating service around 3 years ago and hit it off on our first date. After 1 year of living together, I proposed, and we married shortly thereafter. Her parents, whom I'll call Frank and Leah, were always quite nice and seemed to like me. Nicole always joked that I was the son they never had, and it truly seemed that way. They treated me like family from the moment I met them. They were warm, friendly, and grounded despite their affluence, which I greatly respected. I grew up in an emotionally unstable home. My parents did not love each other, but stayed together for my sake, resulting in regular arguments. Neither were affectionate, and while we are still in touch, family dinners feel more like chores. But Nicole's family was different. They felt like my own people, and I instantly relaxed around them. While I knew they liked me, I never dreamed they would support me over their daughter. My difficulty now is that Frank and Leah want to make me the successor to their inheritance as a result of Nicole's adultery. They want to compensate for what happened by paying me $2 million, while disowning Nicole in the process. I'm not sure if I should accept it because, in the end, the money is rightfully Nicole's, and I'm only being offered it because of her betrayal. Nicole is outraged at the scenario, and I am emotionally heartbroken. I had a lawyer look over everything, and it's a substantial sum of money that I would be taking away from Nicole if I accepted their offer. Despite how hurt I feel, I'm not sure if this is the appropriate thing to do. I obviously want the money, but I am conflicted. Nicole and I have always had a smooth and loving connection. We had little fights, as any couple would, but we worked them out. So when my in-laws invited me over to their house to talk about something important, I had no idea they'd reveal Nicole's infidelity. Nicole works for her father's company and is in charge of recruitment. Because it was a family business, they could easily keep an eye on her and observed she was spending a lot of time with one of the new hires. What made it even more horrible was that the man she was having an affair with was much younger than her. He had recently graduated from college and he was just 21. It was legal, but it seemed unusual that Nicole, although being happily married, felt compelled to pursue love outside of our marriage. Her parents had seen the growing intimacy between the two of them and even asked Nicole about it to be sure. She assured them that they were just close friends and that nothing untoward was happening. This worried her parents, not only because it would have an impact on our marriage, but also because it could lead to legal action. Nicole was in a higher position than the guy she was associated with, and if things went wrong, he could use it against the company and sue them. Despite her parents' persistent questions about their relationship, Nicole argued that it was entirely professional and that there was nothing else to it. Unfortunately, her parents found it difficult to trust her. Despite their cautions, Nicole continued to see him outside of work. They initially refused to notify me because they did not believe it was their responsibility. It was plausible that this was a harmless friendship. However, things escalated, prompting her parents to intercede. They hired a private detective to keep tabs on Nicole. They had no money issues and were able to hire a professional for the work. The detective discovered that Nicole was frequently visiting the other person after work hours. She would tell me she was with friends or at work, and I believed her, but her parents later disclosed that this was not the truth. Every day, once her workday finished, she would go over to his house and spend a few hours before returning home. We all knew that if she was lying to me, something was wrong. When I found out, I was devastated. I sincerely loved Nicole, and a part of me still does, but finding that she had been cheating and lying for months devastated me. This news came about a week and a half ago, and I still remember how upset I was during the meeting with my in-laws. They too were very saddened when they told me the truth, knowing Nicole would never confess. They believed it was best for them to come forward. Nicole had no notion her parents knew the truth. I was the first one they informed. I cried down in front of them, but they consoled me as if I were their own kid. They reassured me that it was not my fault and that they had seen how effectively I handled Nicole. This was completely her doing. She didn't appreciate the love she received from her parents and me and tossed it all away for someone she'd only known for a year. I stayed at their house that night because I couldn't bring myself to go home and confront Nicole. They kindly let me spend the night, and I cried the whole time. I was rattled up and unsure of what to do next. Logically, I understood the next step was to file for divorce, but my heart wasn't ready to give up on her just yet. The following morning, I decided to return home before Nicole went to work. I hadn't returned any of her calls or texts the night before, so she was astonished when I walked up just as she was ready to leave. I was plainly in horrible shape and she was concerned. I sat her down and asked her about the affair, as it was the most pressing issue on my mind. She hesitated and attempted to dispute it at first, but then I showed her the photos her parents had given me, shots showing her car parked outside her coworker's house on the night she had told me she was working late. She tried to say they were just pals hanging around, but there was no reason for her to lie. Eventually, she was forced to reveal the truth. She had been cheating on me. I broke down as soon as she admitted. This time it was worse than previously since, when it was only her parents informing me, I still hoped it was a misunderstanding. Hearing that from Nicole herself shattered any denial I had. I was hysterical, and while I don't remember all I said, I do recall there was a lot of screaming and shouting. Nicole began to cry, confessing that she had been silly and lost sight of what was important since she had grown bored in our marriage. She stated that the affair meant little to her and that she never expected me to find out. It simply made matters worse. If it didn't mean anything, she had no reason to do it. I was shocked to learn that she had wrecked our marriage because she was bored. I recall yelling at her about how much I trusted her, how I had always been there for her, and how she had given it all up for someone she hardly knew. I yelled until she collapsed into a pool of tears. At one point, things became so severe that she collapsed on the floor, wailing with her head in her hands, while I screamed. It was a disaster, and just thinking about it makes me uneasy. Nothing about it seemed normal. When the ordeal ended, I informed her I was done and asked her to leave the house. She begged with me, claiming she would cease things with the other guy immediately and wanted another chance at our marriage. I informed her that as long as she was around, all I could think about was her affair. I needed time to comprehend things, which meant she needed to leave. More disagreements ensued, with her claiming that we could work things out and that remaining together was the proper thing to do. At the time, I was still battling to understand that she had cheated on me. The decision to work things out or leave her was secondary. First, I wanted to digest what had happened, something I couldn't do with her around. I didn't want to breathe the same air as her because she repulsed and irritated me so much. However, she refused to leave, which infuriated me to the point that I informed her I would leave instead. I couldn't take being near her anymore. She was still unhappy and told me I couldn't go because she wanted to work things out and stay married. She claimed it was all a mistake and I couldn't leave her for something like this. I didn't even respond, just left. I didn't bother packing anything and instead began driving aimlessly, unsure where to go. I didn't realize I'd have to stay there overnight until I ran out of gas. I drove to the nearest motel and have stayed there ever since. Despite my best efforts to forgive and forget what Nicole did, our relationship has not improved. I simply can't. So last week, after 3 days of deliberation, I filed for divorce. I hadn't spoken to Nicole since leaving the house, despite her attempts to contact me. The reality is, I have nothing else to say to her since what she did is something I can never forgive or forget. However, my in-laws have been in close communication with me, checking in on me on a daily basis to ensure my well-being. I've been talking to them since when I asked my own parents for aid. They weren't very helpful. They gave non-specific suggestions, such as do what feels right, which was neither comfortable nor useful. Feeling emotionally separated from my parents, I confided in my in-laws. I haven't told my pals yet, but I do need emotional support, which is why I've stayed close to them. Some people may find it unusual, but I'm extremely close to them and don't believe it's wrong. Nicole began messaging me more frequently after being served with the divorce papers, but I have yet to read any of her texts. I silenced her alerts so they wouldn't annoy me, but that doesn't mean I'd moved on. Everything still hurts. To make matters worse, I am also struggling at work. I had to take an unexplained leave of absence since I was unable to commute from the hotel, which is in the middle of nowhere. I am almost out of paid leave, and my employer recently called me to inform me that if I do not return to work soon, I will be terminated. This added to my worry because I have huge bills coming up. Divorce is expensive and I'll need to start looking for a new home to live. I had been discussing all of this with my in-laws in conversation, expecting little support. But they shocked me. They told me that Nicole had put me in this situation, and they would rectify it. I had no idea what they were going to do, but a few hours later, they requested me to come to their house right away. Nicole was present and they wanted us to sort things out, not necessarily about the divorce, but at least about who would reside in the house. They proposed Nicole stay with them, while I required the house to keep my work. I was hesitant to go because I did not want to confront Nicole, but my in-laws persuaded me, and I eventually accepted. When I arrived at their house, I was frightened to meet Nicole after such a long time, but I tried not to let it show. For the first several minutes, we avoided looking at each other. We didn't notice each other's existence until my in-laws began conversing. My in-laws offered that I take over the house so Nicole could live with them, which made sense given that they all worked in the same place. Losing the house would be a significant issue for me because it would mean losing my work without a solid place to live. Then, something unexpected occurred. Nicole began protesting that she did not see why she had to be the one to make such sacrifices. She said it was my fault we were divorcing and informed her parents that they, as her parents, should be on her side rather than mine. She accused them of supporting a cheater, which baffled us all. We stared at her, waiting for her to clarify what she was saying. Her tone was furious and full of conviction, and I began to believe she might have something to say that made sense. Unfortunately, she began spewing total rubbish, and I immediately knew she was just trying to make me look terrible in front of her parents so they wouldn't support me again. Nicole had no idea her parents had told me about the affair, so she probably assumed I had hired an investigator to collect those images myself. Nicole, completely oblivious of her parents' involvement, began fabricating a story, alleging that I was having an affair with a mutual friend. She stated she had noticed how cozy the two of us were whenever we hung together, and she even supplied manipulated images to make it appear as if I was romantically involved with my friend. Nicole stated that her own affair occurred because she was hurt after discovering my alleged adultery, and that she only went out with her co-worker as a form of revenge. She explained to her parents that now that everything was out in the open, she expected them to kick me out of the house and cut relations with me. She insisted that they discontinue their friendship with me because she was convinced I had duped them into thinking I was the victim. Nicole also accused me of planning the meeting with her parents in order to portray myself as innocent and place all of the responsibility on her. At that point, I knew Nicole had made a serious mistake. She had just dug herself a hole with her lies, hoping to expose me and regain her parents' support. Given the circumstances, that was an extremely poor decision. Sure enough, her mother began ranting at her almost immediately, claiming she couldn't believe Nicole believed they'd fall for her falsehoods and badly altered images. Nicole was visibly moved by her mother's reaction, as she had clearly not expected it. Her parents indicated that they had expected her to be honest after being caught, but she had instead become a lying cheater. They even apologized, claiming that they had failed to raise her correctly if she had become this person. Then came the big reveal. My in-laws revealed to Nicole that they had informed me about her affair and handed me the images. There was no point in lying anymore because everyone knew the truth. Nicole's expression at that moment was priceless. A massive battle erupted, which was unavoidable. Nicole felt betrayed and despised the fact that her parents had always treated me as if I were their own son while willing to sell off their own daughter for my sake. Her parents, understandably outraged, called her stupid for not realizing sooner that they were the ones who informed me about the affair. After all, they had asked her about it several times, asking if she had a relationship with her coworker, which she had continuously denied. Nicole said that it had crossed her mind that her parents might have notified me, but she disregarded the possibility, feeling that as her parents, they would show her loyalty regardless of what she did. The dispute lasted a bit before Nicole rushed out, claiming she didn't want to speak to any of us anymore. She stormed out, plainly agitated because she'd had enough of everyone. I felt sorry for her because I could imagine how difficult it must be not to have your own parents on your side. After things had settled down, my in-laws informed me that they had made up their minds. They intended to modify their will and make me the sole successor to their inheritance, believing Nicole did not deserve it and that I was a better choice. It was a big decision, and I was hesitant to accept such a significant quantity of money knowing that it would essentially be stolen from Nicole. I told them I needed some time to think it over because it was a huge deal and I couldn't just agree without thinking about the repercussions. I wanted to make sure I was making the proper decision, so I requested time, and they obliged. They promised me that I would have plenty of time to make my decision. It's been a few days, and I'm still unclear whether it's the moral and ethical thing to do. While Nicole did break our marriage by infidelity, the amount I would inherit from her is significant, and I am not sure if it is fair. I've been thinking about it and am at a loss. That is why I am here. To determine whether it is okay for me to accept my cheating soon-to-be ex-wife's $2 million inheritance. Update 1. Thank you for your helpful feedback and support. I'm doing well emotionally, thanks to God. I've also talked to my friends about it, and they believe I should accept the money. After all, Nicole messed up, and if her parents want to make up by leaving me the money, I should let them. My buddies reminded me that Nicole not only cheated, but she also used false images to make it appear as if I was the one cheating. Her parents might have believed her if they hadn't already learned the truth. Nicole was ready to go to such efforts to avoid culpability, so I have no need to feel terrible about accepting the inheritance. I have made up my mind that I will not reject it. Nicole didn't care about my sentiments when she was out there destroying our marriage for a guy she barely knew. If she is going to be angry with anyone, it should be her parents, not me. Update 2. Today, I contacted my in-laws and informed them that I was willing to accept their offer. They were overjoyed and expressed gratitude for the opportunity to make things right following Nicole's actions. They informed me that Nicole had ceased contact with them and blocked them on all platforms following our argument at their place. She had also submitted her 2-week notice and quit her work, as had her affair partner. I was shocked. I knew Nicole enjoyed her profession, and I suspected her father was grooming her to take over when he retired. Now he must find someone else. Nicole is clearly eager to give up everything because she refuses to accept responsibility for her own acts. My father-in-law's voice seemed disappointed. Despite Nicole's mistakes, she remains their daughter and only child. It fascinated me that my in-laws emphasized doing the right thing over catering to their daughter's desires, which very few parents would do. I attempted to console them, but words weren't enough, so I decided to go see them tomorrow and spend some time with them. I know they must be lonely and hurt. Update 3. I've been staying in a motel for a few weeks now, after leaving my residence. Unfortunately, I was dismissed from my work, but the good news is that my father-in-law spoke with a friend and found me a far better job at his buddy's company. So I guess it's all okay in the end. The divorce proceedings have begun, and Nicole and I are pretty tense whenever we meet with the mediator. It's difficult for me to ignore her, but I need to. Nicole has already started dating and moved in with the other guy, which I know for a fact. I'm not shocked, but I am rather disappointed. I expected her to take longer to move on from me given how long we had been together. But it plainly didn't mean much to her, and I'm now trying to make sure it doesn't mean anything to me either. However, things with my in-laws are going well. We no longer speak to Nicole, nor does she speak to us. We try not to bring her up because it's a delicate subject for all of us. It's sad, but at least we're a family now. My in-laws haven't amended their will yet, but they intend to do so when the divorce is finalized, and they'll make sure Nicole isn't aware until after they're gone. We try to meet up frequently because we know we're all going through the same thing and can help each other. I hope it improves over time, and maybe someday it will. Family betrayed me in court for my son's custody, now they beg for help after my ex turned on them. I secretly recorded their confession. Hello, so this is going to be a little long because I need to include a lot of context for it to make sense. I, 33F, got divorced a few months ago, but it had been planned for over a year. I met my ex-husband James through friends when I was 25, and after 2 years of dating, we decided to live together and marry. His family was quite conservative and traditional, and they did not approve of live-in relationships, so we had to marry if we wanted to be together. I genuinely liked James, so I didn't mind marrying him. My parents supported our decision, so we married. Within a year of living together, I discovered that I was pregnant, and we were ecstatic. It seemed like our family was finally coming together and everything was falling into place. Unfortunately, after I revealed my pregnancy, my in-laws began pressing me to quit my career and focus on being a mother. It didn't help that my job was not very generous about maternity leave, and because I hadn't been there long, my leave would be especially brief. So at the time, I considered the advantages and cons and decided to leave my work. I didn't make this decision alone. James and his parents were convincing me it would be the greatest decision in the long term, so I just had to do it. James appeared assured and promised to take care of the family. I didn't have to worry about money. He'd bring enough home, and my sole attention would be on raising our child. My parents and older brother both agreed it was best if I stopped my job and stayed at home, like my mother had done. She elected not to return to work because family was her top concern. With pressure from both sides of the family, I chose to quit during my second trimester. Everything appeared to be in order, and I had complete faith in my husband to not let me down, so I quit my booming career to become a stay-at-home parent. However, shortly after my kid was born, I observed something peculiar about James's behavior throughout the latter months of my pregnancy. I couldn't put my finger on it, but his vibe felt odd. Sure, he seemed joyful when our baby was born, and I expected things to return to normal, but unfortunately, they worsened. He got angry around me, and if I tried to speak with him, he snapped. He only seemed genuinely happy when he was playing with our son. Aside from that, it seemed like he was constantly annoyed to be at home with me. He started working longer hours, and even on weekends, he made excuses not to spend time with me. I didn't understand what was wrong, but I kept trying to make our marriage work. Unlike him, I still loved him and refused to give up on us. This pattern persisted for around 2 years following my son's birth. James stayed at work longer than required, and even when he came home, he wasn't truly with me. I couldn't really complain since whenever I tried to talk to him, he said he was too exhausted from work. And it was not an easy chore for him to be the sole breadwinner for the household, which was really disrespectful to me because I was perfectly capable of earning money for myself. But I had to rely on him since he promised to make things easy for me. I even asked him a few times if he would rather that I returned to work so that we could split the bills and he didn't have to face all of the pressure. However, he claimed that would be an insult to him and his abilities, and that his parents would never accept. We'd have a difficult time with them if I went back to work. So I stayed at home and raised my son, which was the only thing that made me happy because James had changed. He was no longer the man I'd married. About a year ago, I discovered that James had an affair with one of his co-workers. It was quite difficult for me to find this because I had been skeptical for quite some time. I even snooped through his phone and laptop while he was sleeping and discovered nothing. I knew all of his passwords because he had written them down in his notepad, but that didn't help. It almost seemed as if he had nothing to conceal, and I began to feel dumb for being cautious. I even searched through his possessions for a burner phone or anything odd, but I found nothing. I began to suspect that I was being overly paranoid and insecure. But as luck would have it, I witnessed his cheating firsthand. About a year ago, James and I were organizing a spectacular birthday celebration for our son. He'd invited the co-worker he was fooling with. She was a single mother with a youngster around our age, so I wasn't surprised she got invited. James had informed me she was a very close friend, so I saw nothing wrong with her being there. After my son had cut his birthday cake, I went upstairs to change into more comfortable attire for the celebration. When I got into my bedroom, I saw James and his co-worker making out. She was seated on his lap. It took me a few minutes to grasp what I saw. First and foremost, it was in my bedroom, which exacerbated the situation. Second, they did not even pause when they heard the door open. I had to walk up to them before they noticed I was there. I'm quite sure they felt it was great to make out in my bedroom, at home, just for the thrill of it. But they obviously did not anticipate me to have a complete breakdown. I'm not proud of it, but discovering that what I'd believed for so long was true sparked something inside me. I grabbed the co-worker's hair and began dragging her out of the room. According to what I was later told, James is physically stronger than me, but he was unable to stop me. I can't recall much of it since I had a rage blackout. I carried her downstairs, James following behind me, and tossed her in the center of the room when everyone was still present. I don't recall much of what I said, but I supposedly called her various disparaging names and informed everyone what she and James were up to in my bedroom. I didn't care if my kid or his pals were present. Looking back, that was really uncomfortable and inappropriate, but I didn't consider it at the time. I screamed at the top of my lungs. My parents, brother, and in-laws were all present. My father eventually calmed me down and returned me to my room. Once inside, I completely broke down and sobbed uncontrollably. But rather than staying with me to console me, my father locked me in my room and returned downstairs. I should have known then that my parents did not genuinely care about me. I knew they were more concerned with appearances than reality, but this was absurd. Nobody came to check on me over the following several hours. Even after I calmed down, I had no idea what was happening outside. I didn't have my phone, so I couldn't reach anyone. It wasn't until after midnight that my brother unlocked the door and allowed me out. He didn't even inquire how I was. They probably would have kept me in the room longer if I hadn't started banging on the door like a crazy lady. When I got out, I asked my brother what had transpired since I was locked in. He informed me that practically everyone had fled following my collapse. He also told me James had departed with his parents and our children. My parents, brother and I were the only people left in the house. My brother let me out to discuss what we should do next. But in my family, discussion means telling me what to do. They informed me that I needed to apologize to everyone for how I had behaved at the party. Not only that, but I also needed to apologize to James and his parents. Apparently, James had difficulty convincing his co-worker not to file charges against me because what I did to her was technically an act of physical assault. My family told me that I owed it to James to speak things out and work on our marriage rather than making this a bigger deal. I lost it. I screamed at them to leave my house because I was not about to allow anyone stand under my roof and order me to apologize to my unfaithful spouse. I got into a heated argument with my family because they told me that I owed it to James to make things right and give the marriage another try, or they would sever ties with me. So I told them to go ahead since I had gotten to the point where I didn't care what anyone thought of me. I was going to file for divorce and get out of this situation without anyone's approval. I phoned a lawyer the next day and filed for divorce less than a week after the occurrence. James was served shortly after, and he had the arrogance to express disappointment and disbelief. He returned home the same day he was served with the divorce papers and demanded an explanation. I told him I was not going to take him back after what he had done and how he had disrespected me. We had a nasty verbal argument in which I called him a lot of names, and he promised me that I would never see my son again. I had no idea he would actually keep his word. Then the legal struggle started. We had very few common assets, so the divorce proceedings were far smoother than the custody battle. The house belonged to me because I bought it with my own money, and there was no doubt about that. Everything else was to be auctioned with the earnings divided between us. We only had to wait the 6-month waiting time mandated by the state, after which the divorce would be finalized if a settlement was made. The only disagreement was about alimony. Because James forced me to quit my work and I didn't have enough money. I needed alimony to start anew. He, however, believed that I should not receive any alimony at all. Fortunately, I had a few texts that demonstrated he had promised to support me. Otherwise, I might not have received any. The divorce process was easier for me emotionally because I had already distanced mentally from James. However, it was the custody struggle that truly killed me. Unfortunately, my parents and brother stabbed me in the back for cash. My ex-husband and his lawyer were nasty, and they started building a case against me, painting me as an unstable, reckless, and insane mother. They wanted to show that I was unfit to raise our son alone, so James and his parents should gain full custody. I assumed my parents and brother had been bought off by my ex-in-laws because they were wealthy, and I couldn't think of another reason for my own family to turn against me. I'm very sure my family warmed up to my in-laws from the start because of their money. James accused me of being a functioning alcoholic with serious rage issues. They made up situations in which I allegedly lost my temper and endangered my son, even though none of this had actually occurred. They needed to portray me as the villain. I expected some people to side with me, but all of my friends supported James, which I believe was owing to my breakdown at my son's birthday party. The worst betrayal, however, occurred when my parents and brother testified against me in court, stating I needed rehab and intense therapy before being permitted to see my son. They even suggested that James cheated because he was tired of coping with my unpredictable behavior. Despite a good fight with my counsel, I was unable to win custody of my son. The odds were stacked against me, and there was little I could do to prevent the inevitable. My lawyer and I worked hard to gather proof to prove I was a decent mother, but it all went to waste. The decision was revealed a few months ago, and it was the last time I saw my kid in person. I was granted supervised visiting privileges, but James never let me see him. It was pointless. My son is now 4 years old, and I'm constantly concerned that he'll forget me. According to a few relatives that remain on my side, my family continues to see my son. They routinely publish images with him, but I can't see him. James and my son live with my in-laws, and it appears that everyone but me gets to spend time with him. I cannot imagine something more heartbreaking. I've been living on memories of my son, thinking James was taking excellent care of him. I don't think I could have provided a comfortable life for him on my current pay, given I've only lately resumed working. I got a job at a friend's startup, but it doesn't pay well. Most of the employees are in their early 20s, working for experience and expecting to advance to better chances. Although I receive alimony, it is insufficient to maintain my previous lifestyle. I can't cut expenditures like a bachelor, but it's all I have right now. I had wanted to reapply for joint custody once my life was in order, but an unexpected chance presented itself a few weeks ago. My parents contacted me after months of silence to ask for assistance. It turned out that James was not the fantastic man they thought he was. My brother sent me an email requesting that I come over to their place since they had realized something crucial and wanted to come clean. They were tired of keeping secrets from me and wanted to be a part of my life again. I tried to ignore the email, but I couldn't quit thinking about how this might help me get my son back. So I went to their place that evening. I anticipated them to be living like kings after selling me out for money from my ex-in-laws. However, they were actually living in worse conditions than previously. My son, on the other hand, was overjoyed to see me, which added to an already wonderful evening. When I visited my family that day, they practically began pleading for forgiveness as soon as I walked in the door. Apparently, they recognized how severely they had messed up and there was no turning back, yet they still wanted me to forgive them. After the divorce, when my ex-in-laws and James were approached about the money they had been promised, James informed my family that it was no longer occurring. Apparently, they had just been told that they would be well compensated if they turned on me and testified in their favor. However, there was no written evidence to support it. If my relatives tried to go back and inform me about everything, James and his family would make sure they never saw my son again. So, for the protection of my son, they agreed to keep their mouths hidden, even though they had not been paid as promised. But things grew worse. They were not only pushed into testifying against me, but they were also treated as free babysitters. Every day, James would drop off our boy at my parents' house and they had to watch him while giving up their own time. It was really inconvenient because both my father and brother had jobs to attend to, and my mother couldn't handle all of the housework and caring for her grandchild on her own because she was getting older. So either my father or brother would have to work from home every day, which was growing increasingly tough for them, which is why they approached me to finally put an end to it. Apparently, they wanted to make a deal with me. They told me that if I provided them the money my ex-in-laws promised, they would represent me in court and ensure that I got custody of my son. I was going to recommend it myself, but it wasn't unexpected that they did. My family had always been materialistic, and this was especially true now that my father's business had failed and they were back to working for other people. Obviously they would want money more than ever now because my father wanted to retire but didn't have enough saved because he had invested all of his money in the firm, which eventually failed. They claimed they could make up a tale about how they were forced and coerced into testifying against me so they wouldn't be charged with perjury while under oath. They were unaware that I no longer required their assistance. I had been recording everything they said since the moment I came inside the house since I suspected something was wrong and didn't want to take any chances. So I had already recorded everything. Nonetheless, I encouraged my family to give me screenshots if they had any to prove they had been used and lied to, and I promised to help them. Following that, I departed. I'd already seen my son, and I had more than enough evidence to seek custody again. So that's what I did the next day with my lawyer. This time, I was ready. The custody lawsuit is still ongoing, but one thing is certain. I will be able to prove that none of the accusations James made against me were accurate, and that my family had been lying about everything all along. I've already listened to the recording, which has greatly influenced my decision. James and his lawyer are literally rushing for evidence, while I take it all in and enjoy the show. This is what they made me go through the last time, and now I get to do it to them. It's karma at its best, and I couldn't be happier. The only thing that hasn't been ideal is that my family has said I used them, just like James did, and that I had no right to record them without their permission and use it against them. However, in my state, that is perfectly legal and acceptable in court. I had no idea what they were talking about until they told me I had broken their trust by recording them. Bold statements from those who broke my confidence by siding with my ex-husband in the custody dispute. They believed that what I did was wrong because what they had done was out of necessity. They needed the money. But I didn't need to screw them over and expose them to perjury. They stated they had already committed to assist me and testify against James and his family, so I didn't need to go behind their backs. They keep contacting me, and it's becoming increasingly difficult for me to ignore. So am I a jerk for going over my family's back and putting them in danger of being charged with perjury? Update 1. Hello everyone. The custody dispute is still ongoing, and James and his lawyer are working tirelessly to show that they have been speaking the truth. Of course, they might be charged, and since it is a criminal, they could face jail time. But it is not my business right now, and it should not have been at any time. I'm not sure why I was worried about my parents when they obviously weren't concerned about me when it was my turn. So it's basically tit for tat right now. The comments section made me realize how entitled my parents were. Anyway, I've terminated connections with them. They can all go wherever they choose. I want my son to be okay and with me. I've waited long enough for this, and I'm not going to allow my family's victimization of themselves to stop me. If they can sell me out for money, I don't think I need to be loyal to them. I am done now. Update 2. So the good news is that I've finally gotten custody of my son. I don't think I've ever been this happy in my life. The second good news is that my in-laws, James and my family have been charged with perjury and they may face jail time. I'm sure they're regretting everything now, but I don't care since I got what I wanted. My son back, which was all I ever asked for. According to what I know, James is still attempting to fight it and avoid jail, but I don't think it will work. I've already applied for a restraining order against all of them because I've been receiving extremely frightening text messages, and I'm certain it's from these folks. Nobody else would want to hurt me, unless it was them. Things have been really busy and crazy over the last several weeks, but I'm finally learning to slow down. I badly want to spend more time with my son, therefore I chose to shorten my working hours. I've also considered selling my property and moving to a smaller apartment to save more money. I still have a lot of work to do. Repairing my relationship with my son will not be an easy process. Even though he is glad to be with me, he continues to inquire about his father and grandparents, and I am at a loss for words. He's told me a few things about them, such as how he spent the majority of his time with his grandparents and how his father and my in-laws were only available for a portion of the day. When I ask him how it was living with his grandparents, he makes a face and says it wasn't very good since everyone was continuously fighting. I completely get that. It sounds like they treated him poorly because they refused to accept responsibility. I can't comprehend why they'd treat a youngster that way, but I wouldn't put it past them. They are undoubtedly capable of making even a young child feel horrible about himself. But I don't have to worry about it anymore because he's with me. Update 3. Hello everyone. I can't believe I've returned here after nearly 5 years. My life is so different right now that it feels unreal. 5 years is a long time, and a lot has changed, the first being my son's age. We have a wonderful connection right now, and after many therapy sessions, he and I have finally become the mother and son we should have been from the start. He's growing into a wonderful man, and I'm confident he'll be nothing like his father. I simply know it in my heart. He's 9 years old and already a wonderful gentleman. I'm parenting him on my own, and I have full custody because James gave up and moved to Europe after getting out of jail. I cannot say I am surprised. He left with his co-worker, who he had been cheating on me with, and they are now married. I guess he merely replaced his biological son with another child. It's terrifying, but that's the type of person he is. My parents and my brother were released from jail after 6 months of good behavior. We haven't communicated, and they didn't try to contact me when they were freed, which I appreciate because I doubt I would have had much to say to them anyway. I have no news regarding my in-laws. I haven't heard from them in years, and that's for the best. I believe I am living a life now. God has blessed me with a solid job and a consistent salary. I'm still working at the company I started with, my friend's business, and it's doing pretty well. So life worked out beautifully for me and my son, and it was more than I could have hoped for. I am very appreciative of everything. I couldn't give them grandchildren, so my parents convinced my husband to leave me. They were shocked when I had a baby girl 3 years later. So, I, 30F, recently ran into my parents and ex-husband Scott, 33M, and I'm not sure how I feel about the encounter. For reference, my parents and I have not spoken in almost 3 years, and neither has my ex-husband. We split 3 years ago and have not communicated since then. In fact, I've done all in my power to avoid seeing them again because they devastated my life and mental health while I was still with them, to the point that I felt like I didn't deserve to exist. After my divorce, I went to the suburbs and sought to create a different life for myself, away from everyone and everything associated with my past. So running into them recently was a great surprise for me, and I said some things to them that I'm not sure were the best move for me. My parents had always desired a boy. It's not that they mistreated me growing up, but it was clear to me that they would have treated me differently if I had been a boy. My mother had even mentioned it on multiple occasions, and I had tried my hardest to be the son they never had, but I was unable to achieve. After graduating from college and moving out, I tried to stay in touch with my parents because, no matter what, they were still my family and the only family I had. I wasn't really close to my grandparents, and I didn't have any uncles or aunts who would look after me. So I accepted my fate. No matter how much they pushed me away, they were still my sole family, and even if they did not appear to be interested in staying in touch with me, I attempted to retain contact. When I was about 23 years old, I began dating Scott. We met at a concert and had an instant connection. After 6 months of dating, I introduced him to my parents, and they began to make more of an attempt to communicate with me. They would call me more frequently, inquire about my relationship, and generally show more interest in my life. I had noticed the difference, but because it was welcome, I didn't give it much thought and simply accepted it. The longer I dated Scott, the more involved my parents were in my life. At one point, it seemed like we were all one big happy family. I was overjoyed since it was everything I had ever desired, so I didn't question it, even though I should have. After a little more than 2 years of dating, we became engaged and married after 3 years together. After we married, Things were going well for a time, and I was enjoying my life as a newlywed. However, 6 months after my wedding, my parents began hinting that they wanted a grandchild. I was only 26 at the time, and I wasn't quite prepared. I wanted to wait a few more years before trying for a kid, but at their suggestion, I spoke with Scott, who was all for the notion of establishing a family. Because of his eagerness, we decided to begin trying for a baby immediately after our wedding. We tried for a long time, but after several months, we were still unable to conceive. We began to suspect that anything was wrong and opted to be tested. Unfortunately, I found out that I was infertile. It was a great shock for both of us, but my parents were even more disappointed, and they didn't even try to hide it. My father went away instead of comforting me when we told both of our parents. We decided to stop trying for a while, and Scott and I spoke about attempting other methods, such as IVF. However, this would be extremely costly, and success on our first effort was not certain. So we had to postpone our plans to raise a family until we had saved enough money to cover multiple rounds of IVF. We were satisfied with that, despite our initial disappointment. However, my parents were really dissatisfied. They stopped visiting and talking to me, and no matter how much I tried to explain that this wasn't all my fault, they weren't ready to listen. After a few weeks, I was so disappointed by their actions that I called them and vented. I told them they had been treating me unfairly since I couldn't give them a grandchild right now, which made me wonder if they were really capable of being decent grandparents when I did have a child. I informed them that they had always treated me cruelly because I was not a boy, and I saw how differently they treated my spouse. For a long time, I attempted to ignore it and keep our friendship going, but now I'm not interested in keeping in touch with them and would rather that they stay away from me forever. It was difficult for me to express that since for so long, all I wanted was their acceptance. But now I recognize that it was nearly impossible. Instead of apologizing, they escalated their actions and were happy with me not speaking to them again. They told me I was worthless as a woman since I couldn't have children, and they wanted nothing to do with me. It was painful to hear them say that, but at least I knew where I stood with them. After that phone call, I did not talk with my parents again, and we were done. When I told Scott about the phone call, he was sympathetic at first, but after a few days I saw that his attitude toward me was shifting. I ignored it at first because I was already going through a difficult time mentally, and I didn't want to accept that my spouse might leave me. So I started pretending that nothing was going on and that everything was fine. Within a few months, he had changed entirely and was constantly chilly to me. I tried everything I could to save our relationship, but nothing worked. 3 months later, he returned home with the divorce papers and announced that he was done with me. I couldn't say I was startled, but I did try to reason with him. I told him we could always try for a kid later, but he stated he had a lot of reasons to leave and didn't want to talk about it. He wanted it to end as quickly as possible because it was difficult for both of us. The divorce took nearly 7 months to finalize, and they were the most difficult months of my life. I was absolutely alone, and I had broken down. To make matters worse, a few weeks after he informed me that he wanted a divorce and had moved out, I learned from a few relatives that Scott was supposedly living with my parents. I knew talking to them wouldn't help, so I decided to speak with my in-laws about it. It was an unpleasant chat, but they informed me that my parents had been in contact with Scott for several months. I suppose they had been brainwashing him into leaving me, which is why Scott decided to leave, even though my in-laws thought it was a bad idea. He had argued with them and stopped speaking to them. I'm not sure what they told Scott, but my in-laws informed me that Scott implied my parents had said he deserved better. So I'm still not sure what they told him, but I think they were just desperate to have a son in any way possible. Since I was no longer speaking to them and they couldn't hope for a grandchild from me, they quickly decided to take Scott under their wing and get him to leave me. My divorce left me extremely damaged, and it took me several months to get back on my feet, but I did it. Since then, I have not looked back and have done everything in my ability to forget the past and go forward. After my divorce, I moved to the suburbs. I started a new job, changed my appearance, and blocked my parents and Scott on social media. I also told all of my former friends and relatives that I never wanted to hear anything about them again, and I didn't want them to know anything about me. Everyone respected it. For the past 3 years I've been in treatment and doing well. The only thing that bothered me was the absence of a baby. I still desired a child despite the fact that I no longer had a husband or parents. I felt like I was ready to become a mother. Last year, I began IVF procedures and became pregnant with the help of an anonymous donor. 4 months later, I gave birth to my beautiful girl. Life has been very good since she was born, and I'm very pleased. 4 days ago, I was walking down the street with her when I ran into my folks and Scott. I was astonished to find them on my street. I believed they were come to visit me, But then I noticed they were stepping out of a residence a few blocks away. When they saw me, I froze. I should have returned home, but I simply couldn't bring myself to do so. They approached me, greeted me, and immediately inquired about the baby, as they were aware that I was infertile. I responded truthfully, and by that point I had comprehended what was going on and began walking back home. But Scott stopped me and said he was delighted he ran into me because he had been thinking a lot about me lately. They had apparently come to visit his aunt, who had recently moved into the neighborhood, and he took bumping into me as a message from the cosmos that he should make things right and give our relationship another opportunity. My parents were also standing there, and they demanded that I invite them home to talk about all that has been going on in my life, as they had clearly missed out on a lot. I was shocked that they were even suggesting this, let alone that they expected me to allow them in after everything that had transpired in the past. It took me 3 years to move on from everything, and I'm still in therapy trying to work through my emotions. So I had an outburst. I told them I'd rather have a lot of murderous wild animals in my house than them, since they'd still be better. I told them to quit acting like they cared about me or what was going on in my life, since the only reason they wanted to talk to me now was that I had a baby. My parents wanted to talk to me because they were finally going to have a grandson, and Scott wanted to talk to me because, clearly, he couldn't find anyone else. He assumed that because I had previously been able to conceive, getting pregnant again would be easy, and he could just return to my life. It was sickening that they only regarded me as a supply of babies, not a human person with real emotions. They had all abandoned me when I most needed their emotional support. Even though I had expected this from my parents, who had made it plain throughout my upbringing that they would have chosen a boy, it was nonetheless shocking. They believed that a woman's worth was determined by her ability to be a mother. The big surprise, though, was Scott. He had spent so many years with me and soothed me, but he had still gone along with whatever my parents suggested for some strange reason and abandoned me when I was at my lowest point. I hadn't forgotten anything they'd said to me, so I just repeated everything back to them. Since I was worthless as a woman and Scott deserved better, perhaps they should leave me alone now. I've always been a quiet and shy person, but when they confronted me on the street that day, I yelled at them from the top of my lungs. It was the culmination of 3 years' worth of rage, so it was quite unpleasant. After I finished ranting at them, I dashed back to my house and closed the door as quickly as possible. I was feeling quite bad after that, so I opted not to go to work for a few days and have stayed at home with my baby ever since. Since then, my interactions with my parents and Scott have played over and over in my mind. I honestly had no idea what I was going to do about it until last evening, when I got a call from an unknown number. I'm not sure why, but I decided to answer the phone yesterday. Normally, I don't answer calls from unknown numbers. It was Scott on the other phone, and I could hear my folks whispering in the background. I'm very sure they weren't attempting to be quiet, they just wanted me to know they were there. Anyway, I tried not to be too impacted by it. I just informed him that I did not want him to phone me again because otherwise, I would have to take preventive measures against him, which I did not want to do. I reminded him that the same thing applied to my parents. I didn't want anything to do with them, and the only reason I answered the phone was to inform them that I was done. I had finished 3 years ago and was still clinging to it. But Scott told me to hear him out, and I couldn't bring myself to hang up, so I let him speak. He admitted to me that he, like my parents, had made mistakes, but it was out of disappointment. He mentioned that both my parents and he were looking forward to beginning a family, having a baby and so on. They struggled to accept the fact that I was infertile and hesitant to do IVF until we had saved enough money. They hadn't handled it well, but they wanted another chance to prove they were worthy of being in my life. After a few seconds, I informed him I didn't want any of the rubbish they were selling me. They wouldn't have cared about me if they hadn't seen me carrying a kid that day, and that was the bottom line. That was the truth, and I was sick of them pretending otherwise. I was about to hang up when my parents spoke out from the background, saying that this was exactly the type of behavior that had caused them to cut me off in the first place. Apparently, they thought I was selfish and just concerned with myself when I discovered I was infertile. They said that instead of giving everyone their space, I constantly forced my presence on them and tried to get them to comfort me and pay attention to me, despite the fact that they were dealing with the news themselves. That, they explained, was why everyone had pushed me away, leaving me with no one to turn to. I didn't continue the conversation after that. I simply hung up. I know they were just attempting to dupe me, but I can't help but question myself now. So for my own peace of mind, I need to ask, am I to blame since I sought reassurance after learning that I was infertile? Edit. First and foremost, many people questioned why my parents had not tried for another child after I was born, especially because they desired a boy so much. My mother experienced a lot of issues with her first pregnancy, so the doctors advised her to wait a few years before trying again. But even when my mother had me, she was in her mid-30s. Waiting a few more years would have put my mother in her late 30s, making the pregnancy considerably riskier. My mother had a tough time conceiving me, just as I had battled and eventually discovered I was infertile. The only difference was that while she was struggling, her mother-in-law was rude to her. But this time, it was my own mother who couldn't stop thinking about how I felt. Anyway, that was the reason they couldn't have another kid and were left with only me, a girl. I'm not sure what kind of relationship Scott had with his parents, but from what I saw, they seemed to get along nicely. As of now, I'm not sure if they've been able to reconcile following their recent fallout, because I haven't contacted his parents and, obviously, haven't spoken with Scott about it. Scott is an only kid, so he didn't face any competition. When I visited his parents, I could tell they loved him and had treated him well since boyhood. So I'm not sure why he became so attached to my parents. At least with my parents, I knew they wanted a son, which explains why they started treating Scott that way. But with Scott, I'm not sure what went wrong. I've spent the last 3 years trying to forget about everything, so I hadn't given it any attention or questioned it. But now that you've brought it up, I feel compelled to speak with my ex-in-laws to get to the bottom of it, if only for my own curiosity. Anyway, I hope this answers any questions. Update 1. I decided to speak with my ex-in-laws to find out why Scott has been acting the way he has. To be honest, I couldn't think of a single reason why he needed to go visit his aunt with my parents. It was simply bizarre. I already knew it wasn't my fault. They had deserted me when I needed them because they are bad people, and I knew they were only attempting to gaslight me. I just wanted reassurance and didn't want to bother my friends with it because it was too personal, so I shared it here. So, thank you to everyone who informed me that I wasn't the terrible guy here. It was weird reaching out to them after 3 years of no communication, especially because the last time I spoke with them was around the time of the divorce. Fortunately, they were pleased to hear from me. After some small conversation, I came right to the issue and inquired why Scott was so close to my parents, and if they had contacted him. They told me that a few months after their last battle, they had reconciled with Scott and were now in contact with him. However, he had kept in touch with my parents. They clarified that Scott was adored as a youngster, so he wasn't attempting to replace his parents with mine. However, my parents had been suspicious since the start of our relationship. Even when we were dating, they attempted to persuade him to join them. Scott had informed his parents that my parents would periodically invite him to supper, even when I was busy, and that he would accompany them alone. He thought this was something to brag about because he believed he had impressed my parents simply by being himself, which was partially correct. Being a guy was enough to impress them. They had already spent a lot of one-on-one time together without my knowledge, and Scott had begun to look up to them as parental figures, despite the fact that he had his own parents who he respected. It was very complicated. On top of that, my parents were continually showering him with expensive presents and writing him checks. That was the money Scott offered to use for IVF while we were together, but I assumed he was joking because we didn't have that much money. I never wanted him to do anything dirty for money, and he didn't want to tell me that he had gotten a large sum of money from my parents since it would have forced him to reveal the nature of his relationship with them. Even after that, I declined to go with IVF because I did not believe he had the funds and I wanted to save. My parents used that to persuade him to oppose me, claiming he deserved better, someone who believed in him. Within a few months, they were able to brainwash him, and he eventually left me. My ex-in-laws apologized to me, but said that while they disagreed with Scott's relationship with my parents, he was their only son, and they couldn't cut him off either. I don't blame them, they owe me nothing, and they were only being helpful by speaking the truth. Now that I know the reality, I see no need to entertain any of them if they contact me. They're all horrible people that don't deserve my attention. Update 2. I finally decided to return to work after nearly 2 weeks off. Fortunately, I have plenty of maternity time left because I did not take the entire 6 months off in one go, and my company's policy is flexible. While I was at work, just my daughter and her babysitter remained at home. I trust the nanny totally because she has excellent recommendations and I know her personally. She's an excellent woman. She called me about halfway through the workday. She quickly informed me that she had moved my kid to her own home since she was unsure whether staying at my place was safe given my ex-husband's conduct. I consented and let her take my daughter home, guaranteeing their safety, and then contacted the cops as I drove home. On the phone, she told me that Scott had been outside for a few minutes, yelling for me to come out. When he learned I wasn't home, he attempted to kick down the door. He was cursing loudly and my daughter was sobbing, so my nanny called me right away so I could notify the police. She exited through the back door and strolled to her home via the backyard gate, as she lived only a few minutes away. That way, My baby could be safe while I dealt with my ex-husband and the cops. To be honest, compliments to her. Her primary goal was my child's safety and well-being, which was appropriate. When I got home, the cops had already arrived, and it was clear Scott had been drinking. It seemed strange because it was only around midday, yet there he was, inebriated. I decided to file charges against him because he had really ticked me off and I wanted him out of my life. This also offered me the opportunity to get a restraining order against him, since he was plainly losing control. The authorities took him away, and a few minutes later, my nanny returned with my daughter. I gave her the rest of the day off because I planned to stay at home with my child. I'll probably have to take a few more days off from work, but I'm not complaining because I get to spend more time with my favorite person. Update 3. It's been a few weeks since my previous post. I've been busy caring for my baby and decided to embark on a new project, which has been exciting. Regarding the situation between my parents and Scott, I was able to obtain a restraining order against him. Fortunately, it wasn't too difficult because I had surveillance tape from the day he showed up intoxicated and started throwing a fuss when he learned I wasn't home. I suppose my parents looked at his condition and decided not to bother me anymore, so they've been staying away. My ex-in-laws informed me that, following what happened, they have decided to cut relations with Scott as well. Apparently, he's having trouble locating other ladies, despite his desire to start a family. He can't do it without a partner, and he dislikes the thought of adopting, which may explain why he acted out the other day. But it doesn't mean I have to forgive him, especially given everything he's put me through. My parents are still attempting to badmouth me to my relatives, which is unfortunate because it isn't working. Everyone knows they did the worst thing to me, and now they're pretending they're the victims. That's not how it works, and they're finding out the hard way. I'm delighted they won't have any relationship with their grandchild. I won't allow it. My kid and I will have a lovely life together without anyone troubling us, and I'm determined to be a far better parent than the ones I had as an example. My stepfather murdered my mother before taking his own life. I'm overwhelmed, lost and unsure of how to move forward. I know this doesn't sound real. I have my boyfriend and my best friend here. I've known this for about 2.5 hours. It still doesn't seem real. I don't really know what I want to accomplish with this post. But I swear it is real. It's 3:51 a.m. in Berlin right now. We were trying to finish watching the movie that we started before the police rang at my door. I don't know what to do. Edit. The police just called me. My stepfather killed himself. I wish I could destroy him. Right now I just feel empty. Edit 2. I don't even know why I'm posting here. I'm usually just a lurker. I guess I just want somebody to know. I feel like the whole world should know. My mother is the most amazing person and she has always been my idol. I don't know how to feel. I'm in our apartment, and I feel like everything I see is her. My evening started so differently. Everything started so differently. I haven't slept yet. I don't know how I will. Though sleeping is usually my talent. Mom wakes me up every afternoon if she feels like I'm sleeping too long. Since I moved back in, during the COVID lockdown. Update. Hello. My last post got capped, so I made a throwaway account. It's been about 24 hours since the police stood in front of the door to my mom's and my apartment and told me that my mother is dead. I've cried so much today, I feel like it's been an ocean of tears, so much that I just feel empty now. I miss her, so fucking much. It still just feels like a bad dream. This can't really be real. Her death was on the news and I saw a picture of a body in a blue body bag being rolled into the back of a wagon. That is my mother. In that bag. Oh my God. I'm going to run down what happened again. Maybe this will make it more real for myself? I don't know. My boyfriend and I were in the park playing speedminton on Wednesday evening when my mom called me and told me she would be coming home. I asked her if everything was okay and she said yes, not to worry about it, and my boyfriend was still welcome to come over if he liked. I told her okay, I would see her in a moment. We both went home and she wasn't there. I wasn't worried. My stepfather and my mom have been together for a while and they're very much in love, but they can fight a lot sometimes. They always make up very quickly. I tried calling her several times to know if she wanted dinner and sent her text messages, and texted and called my stepfather as well. They didn't answer. This wasn't so unusual either. I thought they just made up. I'm guessing by this time he had already stabbed her. I feel sick writing this sentence. The police showed up at 3 in the morning, informed me, stayed in the apartment while my boyfriend called my best friend who rushed over with a taxi. Everything is kind of a blur from then on. I remember sitting down to write the Reddit post because I didn't know how to feel or what to do, and I guess I wanted to scream my pain into the internet void. At that point, my stepfather hadn't killed himself yet. He had taken his car up into the countryside where my mother has a tiny little house at the lake which is her pride and joy. With her garden. Both of them went up there every weekend together. He killed himself there. The fucking bastard. I've never been so angry in my life. I loved him, he was a part of my family, we got along really well. Some part of me wishes I could strangle him. Or scratch his eyes out. I just want to scream in his face, how he could do this to me. To her. My lovely mother. Fuck, she is such a fucking light, she is such an incredible person and we are so close. I told her everything. And not just because she's my mother, she is truly an absolutely amazing person. Everybody who met her loved her. I stayed awake until about 6 a.m. I smashed a few glasses, I cried a lot. We finished watching the movie. Today I had to call all of the people. My grandparents, her brother, her friends. I had to call my stepfather's children in the UK and tell them what happened. I can't imagine how hard it must be for them. My mother was the victim. Their father was the murderer. I feel so bad for them. I've gotten so many calls and messages from people who are offering to help me in any way I need, who cry on the phone and ask me if this is real. To have to tell people over and over again what happened, really wrecked me. Especially my grandparents. My granddad. I don't know how he is going to get through this. He just kept screaming no, no. Not my mom's name. I have to go to the police today to give a statement. Probably talk about their relationship. I have to be there in 412 hours and I haven't really slept yet. I can't really eat either. I just feel like throwing up, just thinking about food. I wanted to thank all of you for your comments on my first post. I know we don't know each other, that I'm just some faraway voice on a screen with a terrible fate. But I did feel better reading your hugs and encouragement. I will have to think about getting a lawyer. My dad is sleeping in the other room. We're going to have to figure out how to get here. Some part of me honestly doesn't see a point anymore. There's so much pain in my life. I've had so many bad experiences. I got through a rape and a drug problem and everything was on its way up. And now this. But I love my mom more than anything, and I can't disappoint her and I'm going to need to be here for my dad and me. I'm sorry for the long text, I just feel like I need to get something out. I feel so lost and empty. I miss my mom. Update. Hello. I guess in some way I wanted to give you people an update on what has been going on with me. When I posted my first post, I was slightly drunk. It was the night the police showed up at my house and rang the doorbell and I was confused. All of your messages from random strangers, helped me in some way. I'd like to thank whoever sent me that poem by Mary Elizabeth Fry. Do not stand at my grave and weep, we used that for the invitation to her party. And also Bianca who painted that beautiful painting of her which she sent me by email. Thank you. The poem by Mary Elizabeth Fry. Do not stand at my grave and weep, I am not there. I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sun on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift uplifting rush of quiet birds in circled flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry, I am not there. I did not die. Also, fair warning, this might be quite a long post. This might trigger someone and I've been writing this post over several days as more information keeps trickling in and the picture of that night is becoming clearer and clearer. I think I'm also mainly writing this for myself. What happened that night, the 23rd of July, is just still so surreal. I'm sitting at my mother's desk right now, in her little office in our apartment that I grew up in Berlin. Her presence in some way is all around me. It has been 23 days since the police showed up in front of my door at 3 in the morning and asked if they could come in. Since my stepfather hung himself. Everything has been so confusing, it's all sort of a mixture between crying, screaming, yelling, throwing things, and just emptiness. I go through phases. Someone linked that famous post about grief and God, it's so accurate. And it's really hard to cope. Since that night I haven't ever actually been alone. This is somewhat exhausting to me in some ways but probably also very important. I'm going to go through the series of events and facts because I also want to set it right. Since in the media, since some of you found the articles online and connected the dots, there is so much false information, it's hard to believe. My mother and my stepfather were together for 8 years and he has only been living in Berlin since then. He has children from his previous marriage, that is all I will say. I am my mother's only daughter. He did not call me and confess to what he did, as many report. But he called some vaguely mutual friend who he walks his dog with sometimes. This was sometime after 11 p.m. At this point he was already up at the summer house. It takes about 1 hour and 45 minutes to get up there. This means my mother had been dead for about 2 hours. It says so in the police report as well. The summer house did not belong to my stepdad, but to my mom. She poured all of the little money she had, and renovated it by hand. It does not in any way belong to him. The police showed up at my mom's and my apartment late at night. They didn't know the address of where he might have gone and were also worried he might come and harm me since he had the keys to our apartment as well. I was watching a movie with a friend of mine. I posted on Reddit a few hours later. The news articles started coming out the next day, connecting my stepfather to a celebrity. I posted because I needed help. This celebrity and my stepfather are by no means friends. They are acquaintances and there is no reason for him to be brought into any of this. That was Wednesday night, Thursday morning. On Friday I was at the Landeskriminalamt, criminal police, and gave a 3-hour statement about them and their relationship. This next part is about my feelings and mainly about my mom. Feel free to skip it. Since then my whole world has been turned upside down. My mother, the person I honestly loved most in the whole world, was just torn from me. It feels like I have this big bleeding hole inside of me. I'm not crying all the time, sometimes I feel okay, but more like empty. My mother has been with me my whole life. The whole 21 years, and I'm not just saying this because she is dead. She is honestly the best mother you could wish for. She is goofy and caring. Her laugh is infectious. She has such integrity. She is the most animated person. When she tells a story she will get up from the table and gesture all around. Her eyes are so shining. I think I might show some pictures of her, because I want people to recognize her beauty. I want the whole world to know she is gone. Because this is an honest and devastating loss to the world, believe me. She is so talented. She got her bachelor in art history in America. She has worked odd jobs all her life. She's always been a hippie. When I was little she started working at this English language summer camp in Thüringen in Germany, and she used to take me there for many weeks with her. On a hill, on a farm in the middle of a giant forest. She's a magician in the kitchen. She can open the fridge door and magically make something out of leftover ingredients that nobody would ever think tastes good. Noodles and carrots, anyone? She likes to make everything herself. She would let milk go bad and make her own ricotta. I have 1,000 jars of her homemade chutneys and jams. She baked her own bread years before the pandemic. She made her own vinegar, her own syrups and alcohol, and her hot sauces are legendary. I used to come home and open the fridge door and I'd ask her which of the many bowls she had covered with little plates were edible and which weren't ready yet. Since she's dead I have found so many started experiments of things I don't even know what they are. I wish I could ask her. There are so many things I wish I had the time to ask her. Writing this is making me cry again. At the beginning of the pandemic, March I believe, I moved back in with her and she ordered 14 different bottles of white wine on Lidl. And every night we'd drink one together while we cooked and I'd write notes on the color and the taste and we'd give it a 1-10 on the Lidl scale. She's one of the funniest people I know. And she is so forgiving. Even when I was younger we would get into huge blow-up fights sometimes and we'd scream. But 5 minutes afterwards she'd come into my room and she'd apologize and tell me she loved me more than anything in the world. We told each other we loved one another all the time. Sometimes just randomly, and hugged each other. I'm so grateful for this. I would say we had a rare mother-daughter bond. I love her with all my heart. She has always been my idol, my role model. If I'm even half the person she is, as generous, hilarious, creative, emotional, forgiving and understanding, I will be lucky. I see her face in front of me all the time. I can hear her laugh. Fuck. I'd really give anything for her to be with me right now. Anything. It really tears me apart. If it weren't for her I would have probably been dead 2 years ago. She pulled me out of my dark holes. She loved me unconditionally. She isn't just my mother. She is my best friend. And I will never ever forgive him for taking her from me. Especially since more and more facts are coming out. End of emotional bit. It's important to preface that I knew their relationship, or to be more exact, I was the closest to both of them together. And it's important to understand that he wasn't some creepy, abusive, scary bad guy. I loved him. He was like a best friend to me. When he came into my mother's and my life, I took him in with open arms. I've confided in him, I've told him secrets, we've had running jokes. We made bets with each other that I usually won, and he had to pay up. He was my family. This makes me feel just as conned. I feel cheated. I feel like I've been blind. I've had bad fights with him as well, and I knew about their fights, but I didn't see this coming. Not even a little bit. I would never put my mother in harm's way. I guess this is why she must have kept things hidden from me. The murder happened in his apartment. They had separate apartments. And afterwards he drove his car up to my mother's country house that they both spent every weekend at. Hunting mushrooms, planning and building things, going swimming in the lake that's right in front of the door. This was their refuge, and I'm assuming this is the reason he went there. Since the day this has happened, I've always assumed he blew up about something, lost control, and he killed my mother while he wasn't clear-headed. This is what made sense to me. That he killed himself because he killed my mother. Because he didn't know how to continue. But the more time goes by and the more facts we uncover, we being my mother's friends and I, not the police, the more it seems it was the opposite. That he killed my mother because he wanted to kill himself. And that he was covering something up. Since the night the police showed up, they've been asking me if I could know where their laptops are. They both had a laptop. And both are missing. They found the empty cases. But they're gone. This sparked suspicion in us. His phone is gone as well, my mother's is not. The police gave it to me. Then there are the other facts. Trigger warning. Despite what it said in the media, she didn't have multiple stab wounds in her chest. There was only one very precise and very small wound that caused her death. He only let someone know what he did after he was up at the house. When he arrived at the cabin, he apparently parked normally, even greeted one of the neighbors. The pieces are falling into place. That this was cold-blooded. I don't really know why I'm writing all this down in a Word document and why I'm going to post it on Reddit, but I need to share. I feel so much hatred and so much anger. I feel it boiling underneath my skin and it keeps threatening to come out. I've smashed so much stuff, I've gotten so angry. Sometimes I snap and I scream at people and other times I just cry and beat my pillows. And sometimes I'm very calm. I can still feel joy. And my mother has this amazing circle of friends that I've known my whole life and who are supporting me. I saw her body in the coffin, and I will never be able to get that image out of my head. She was so tiny, it breaks my heart. I've also slept 2 nights at the cabin, and in the dark every shadow looked like my stepfather. I've become scared, and started locking my doors at night. Murder used to seem something so far off. Something that happened to other people, in a different world, separate from mine. But now it's not. And I won't let him spoil her place, her house. I won't let him take that away from her and from me. I refuse. I just miss her. I miss everything about her. It hasn't been that long yet, and all I want is for her to hug me and say my name and say she loves me and that she thinks I'm an amazing young woman. I want her to cuddle with me in bed, which she did for so many years until I felt myself too old. I want to sit at the kitchen table in the morning with her and have her ask me what I dreamt about last night, and have both of us talk about our dreams. For her to talk with me about my story ideas and my poetry, and to talk with her about the book that she was writing and will never finish. It just hurts so much, I don't know how to ever get past this. She has always been the most amazing person I know, and I can't get over this. I don't know how to get over this. I feel lost. I feel like I have to grow up very fast now and carry her with me. There's so much more to tell. So much. But I should probably stop somewhere. I would appreciate all advice. Thank you for reading. Relevant comments. Commenter. It's 23:40 and now I just want to call my mom. I'll do that in the morning when I wake up. She's my only family since we cut ties with pretty much everyone else. Be brave and take your time to recover. I hope everything will be fine for you after some time and that you'll get even stronger after this terrible event. OP answer. Hi, you're in the same time zone as me. Please do this and tell her you love her. From me. Because I wish I could tell my mom lots of love. Commenter. Hello again. I commented on the original post because I went through something so similar. I want to thank you for the update. It couldn't have been easy to write. But more than that, I'm glad to see you on Reddit just to know you're still around. The part of this post that most struck me was you spending time in the cabin. I remember the days in my father's house after his murders and suicide so vividly, and looking back on it, I wish I hadn't gone there at all. Which leads me to this. You don't have to do things the hard way. You don't have to make things harder on yourself. When grief as raw and shocking as what you've experienced takes over, we sometimes want to swim in it, because at least feeling something is better than remaining numb, feeling hollow. But I want to lovingly and gently encourage you to make sure you're taking care of yourself. I also want to reiterate how useful a trauma-informed therapist can be. I was dead set against therapy after my father's crimes happened. I thought I could handle everything on my own. After all, I'd always been the strong one. I waited a year to find a counselor, and if I could change a single thing I did, it would be that I'd have sought out help sooner. I didn't really know how to ask for help at the time. It took me years to learn how, but it would have been immeasurably useful to have someone help me through all of that. Like you, I was in my 20s when my father killed his girlfriend, her daughter, then himself. That was 16 years ago. There is a life on the other side of all of this trauma and heartbreak. I promise. And the book I just finished writing about was finally handed in on the last day of July. Maybe someday it can help you, and others. I have thought of you many times since your first post. My offer to reach out at any time stands. Any time. Edited to add. Quite a few people asked about the book in this thread and via DM. It's with my agent now, so at earliest it would be out in a year. Books take forever. The title is, We Run to Crush the Grass. Thank you for the interest, but please focus on OP. She needs the love and kindness of strangers. OP answer. You especially. You have helped me so much, Lisa. Thank you so much. You've been such a light in these dark times, advising me, listening to me, checking up on me since my first post, and listening to me complaining about my family. You're such an amazing person, and communicating with you has helped me so immensely. I send you so much love, and I will continue being in contact with you. I can't wait for your book, commenter. You must have inherited your mother's writing talent because your story about her was so beautifully told. I agree with the others who gently suggest you speak with a therapist trained to deal with trauma. They can help you with your anger and other feelings and thoughts as they arise, so you can be guided to a proper healing. My heart goes out to you, and, if you will, I'll pray for 1,000 healing angels to surround you. OP answer. The night the police showed up at my door, at about 4 a.m. it started raining even though it wasn't supposed to. I went outside on the street and I started praying to every god there was, even though I'm not religious. But in these moments it really doesn't matter, you just want something higher to help you. Thank you so much, OP added in this thread. Hey everyone. Imagine my surprise scrolling through Reddit on my living room couch this fine afternoon, when I see a little picture of my mom and me in my feed. Was not expecting that at all, and then to look further down and see all of these wonderful and heartfelt comments underneath. I couldn't believe it, and I actually started crying again. This is the reason I reached out back then, into the void, as I called it, at my darkest time, and Reddit reached back and gave me something to hold on to. When you lose your faith in humanity in that way, I needed the love that came from so many strangers all over, and the support. Yesterday was actually my birthday. I just turned 25, so it has been a bit over 3 years, and I can't believe that 3 years have passed. I can't stand to believe that much time has passed without her. Thinking about it makes it hurt more. I miss her so much. Thank you to everyone for worrying about me and wishing me well. I'll give a quick update, and one of these days maybe sit down and write something more out. I've been in therapy for almost 2 years now, and I have a wonderful therapist that helps me greatly. It took me a while to find her, and there was a lot of trial and error with former therapists, but she's amazing and I'm so happy I have her. She actually says that I have improved greatly. In a number of things, I'm a mess. Though my mother's murder is something that I've buried very deep down below in the darkness of my psyche, and we haven't quite reached it yet. Fiancé banned me from my dad's wedding because of my facial scars. Now she's harassing us and got arrested after we called the cops. I am 16 years old, female, and am attending high school. I've had a horrible run recently with my soon-to-be stepmother. My biological mother died when I was 6 years old. Even though I was very little and my recollections of her are foggy, I recall that my father and I adored her more than anything in the world. She was pretty much my best friend when I was a kid, and I'm grateful that I got to be her daughter for the brief time she was with us. My father was terribly melancholy when my mother died. Even though he tried to disguise it from me, I could tell he was in pain. So I tried my best to cheer him up and be a good daughter. My mother's death drew us closer together, and my father assumed the role of best friend and confidant that my mother had previously occupied. He took on the duties of mother and father with ease, and I am grateful to have had him as a parent. He has never let me down. He was always there for me as I grew up, and even when he was busy at work, I never felt like I couldn't ask him for guidance or simply talk. He always made it clear to me that he was accessible for me, no matter how busy he appeared to be, and this stuck with me. My father began dating Emily 3 years ago, and I was overjoyed for him. I thought he deserved all the happiness in the world, and I was relieved he was finally getting on with his life. I wasn't insecure, as some kids would have been in my situation. I truly supported his relationship with Emily because I wanted him to be able to enjoy his life to the best. He had done an excellent job being there for me after my mother died, and now I wanted him to be there for himself. Most of my family was surprised to learn that, at the age of 13, I had such adult thoughts, and they liked it. But for some reason, Emily seemed to be the only person who disliked me. Even though I had no issues with her, Emily's attitude toward me altered the first time we met. She had been nice to me while my father was in the room, but as soon as he left, I felt something change. I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, I can see that her demeanor toward me turned uncaring when my father was not present. When he returned, she was friendly again. I thought that was strange, but at 13, I assumed I was just overthinking things. This pattern persisted for several years. I never spoke up because I didn't consider it a big problem. When my father was not present, all she did was act apathetic, which was not necessarily terrible but also not good. My father appeared happy, so I didn't say anything. After a year of dating my father, she moved in with us and things changed dramatically. She moved in with us after a year of dating my father, and it felt strange living with her. She worked from home, and as soon as I returned from school, things became unpleasant and tense. Despite the fact that we shared a home, it felt as if she was purposefully ignoring me, pretending I wasn't there. She limited her interactions with me to a minimum, but as soon as my father arrived from work, she transformed into a completely different person, behaving like my best friend. I thought it was unusual, but because it had no detrimental effect on my life, I just went along with it and never brought it up again. We had an unwritten agreement not to bring it up for the sake of my father's happiness. I quickly understood that she and I were not close and would never be, which I was perfectly happy with. That's how we spent the previous few years living together. And my father had no idea we didn't really have a relationship. He thought we were close because of how she described our connection while he was present. They got engaged a few months ago and planned to marry last week. However, the wedding did not take place, and I feel somewhat sorry about this. Emily approached me around 30 minutes before the wedding and informed me that she did not want me to attend. She claimed I appeared too distracting, and would detract from the beauty of the event. Emily said that she had hired experienced photographers and didn't want me to damage the images, thinking I would understand. I was meant to be a bridesmaid, but she simply appointed me to please my father. I knew she didn't want me to be a member of the bridal party, but I consented since it would please my father. I also knew why she didn't want me to attend the ceremony. A dog had attacked my face a few months before. It was a tragic situation, but I was responsible for it. I have a habit of caressing dogs, so when I noticed a woman walking her German Shepherd, I crouched to pet him. I must have startled him, because he attacked me. My nose and cheeks received the brunt of it because they were at the same level as his mouth. I had to be hurried to the hospital, and while it was traumatic, I am well today. My face still has a few surgical scars, but they are mending. I'm not sure if they'll ever go away completely, but they're fading gradually. I had a difficult time accepting the notion that these scars would remain on my face for a long time. I was quite insecure, but my father convinced me that I looked great, and the scars were a sign of strength. His encouragement helped me accept my new appearance. Most people have been supportive and attempted to make me feel better, but Emily was not among them. While I knew she was superficial, I didn't anticipate her to intentionally make me feel horrible about myself. I was really hurt when she informed me that she did not want me at the ceremony. I questioned her right immediately if this was related to the scars on my face. She didn't even hesitate to tell me that she thought my face was distracting and hideous. She didn't want that in her wedding photos 10 years from now since it was unattractive and would mar the photos. As a result, she asked me to move out and requested I not tell my father about it since he would be angry at her, which was the last thing she needed on her wedding day. She explained that she was already anxious from organizing everything and ensuring that everything went smoothly and correctly. She honestly expected me to leave and not attend my own father's wedding because she thought I wasn't attractive enough. She was so entitled and inconsiderate that I resolved to finally tell my father everything that day. I didn't care if it was his wedding day. It was evident to me at that point that Emily was not the type of person who belonged with my father. However, I did not want to confront her directly, so I told her I understood and vowed to remain away from the ceremony. I also assured her that I would find an explanation to explain my absence to my father without getting her in trouble. She was naive enough to fall for it and even thanked me, saying I was doing her a tremendous service and that she hadn't expected me to be so understanding about everything. She claimed I was really mature for my age. I simply laughed it off and exited the room. We were all staying in a hotel because the wedding was taking place on the hotel grounds. After leaving her room, I returned on my own and quickly contacted my father. He was already downstairs, where the wedding was scheduled to take place, and I did not want to waste time looking for him. Even though the wedding was only half an hour away, I knew I was the only person whose call he would answer. As expected, he responded on the first ring. I instantly began my story, telling him everything without halting. I recounted how Emily had treated me over the last few years, how she pretended to be in a relationship with me solely to keep him happy, and how she clearly didn't care about me or being a member of a family. I told him that even if he went forward with the wedding, I needed to give him the truth before he made a decision. He did not say much during the call. All he said was that he was glad I told him the truth, even if it was only minutes before the wedding. He said he understood what he had to do and hung up, telling me to wait in my room until he told me to come out. For the following several hours, I had no idea what was going on. People were contacting me to ask what was going on and why the wedding was delayed, but they stopped after about an hour. Everything became silent. I tried calling my father, but it went to voicemail. I also called some of his pals, who indicated they had no idea what was going on either. Apparently, after my phone conversation, my father went up to Emily's room to speak with her and did not return. The only thing he told his buddies was that the wedding was no longer happening, and that was the message they spread to everyone, so people stopped inquiring about it. I was quite scared because I thought my father would be upset with me for ruining his wedding. I cried in my room for over 4 hours before he arrived to collect me. When I asked him what was going on, he said I didn't need to worry because we were going home. Naturally, I inquired about Emily, and he informed me that she would not be accompanying us and that their relationship had ended. He said it without emotion, so I'm not sure if he was upset about it at the time. Even now I have no idea because he refuses to discuss it. I'm guessing he's upset, but he's not ready to talk about it with me. I'm guessing he's plainly upset but refuses to discuss it so I don't feel guilty. However, it is not working because I'm not feeling well, as Emily has confirmed. She's been speaking negatively about me and I can't believe a woman her age could say such things about a 16-year-old who was only trying to protect her father. Emily has made multiple Facebook postings, but she does not mention me by name, so I can't really point them out and claim they're about me. But I know they are, since she paints me as a crafty and evil person. It's incredibly upsetting because I don't believe I'm like that at all. She claims that I purposefully chose the last few minutes before the wedding to speak with my father in order to embarrass and disrespect her in front of the guests, alleging that this was always my intention. This could not be further from the truth. The only reason I spoke with my father was because she stated that she did not want me at the wedding because of my scars. She's also claimed that I was the one who faked our relationship and never made an honest effort to connect with her on a human level. There may be some truth to that. When I saw she wasn't the same person around my father as she was with me, I gave up trying to understand or get along with her. I simply ignored her in return. But I assumed that was because she showed no desire in developing a connection with me. I can tell she's unhappy, and I feel responsible for ruining the entire wedding. Even though I know I have no reason to feel bad, I am unsure about what I did. A part of me believes I owe both Emily and my father an apology. Maybe I should have spoken up sooner. Keeping everything to myself until the wedding made everything worse, but I'm also worried I'm behaving out of emotion. I wanted to be sure I wasn't in the wrong before doing anything. Am I the asshole, AITA, for informing my father about my stepmother's behavior half an hour before the wedding, leading it to be cancelled because she made a comment about my scars and stated that she did not want me at the ceremony for the purpose of flawless pictures? Update 1. Thank you so much for your comments on my initial post. I appreciate what everyone has said. You are all so kind. I have determined that I will not apologize. After what has transpired, I genuinely do not believe I should, and I certainly do not owe anything to Emily. Everything she accuses me of is precisely who she is in reality. My father has blocked her everywhere, so she can no longer reach him. However, she can still text me, which she did. She contacted me a few days ago and went off on me about what had happened prior to the wedding. It has been over 15 days since the wedding, and this occurred around 4 days ago. It began with a routine text in which she requested if we could speak. I figured, why not, while I was still feeling responsible and bad for spoiling the wedding. That proved to be a terrible error. As soon as I informed her she could call, she called me, and when I answered, she and several of her friends began yelling at me, calling me the most awful insults they could think of. This lasted for almost a minute and a half. I was so shocked that I couldn't grasp what was going on. This was a woman in her 30s, and I understand why she didn't like me, but this was literal bullying, and I wasn't expecting it after all her posts. I suppose I should have known better and avoided interacting with her at all, but my guilt clouded my judgment. Anyway, once I came to my senses, I hung up the phone and went straight to my father. I informed him about the Facebook posts and phone call. I also apologized for keeping it from him, explaining that I didn't want to make him any more angry than he was already. Attempting to keep things from getting worse simply made matters worse. We had a serious discussion about my behavior, and he informed me that I could come to him with whatever difficulty I was having, whenever I needed his assistance, because that's what he was here for. He emphasized that he is here to protect me and that he, not I, is the parent, therefore I do not need to worry about protecting him from anything. He also informed me that I am the most important person in his life, and nothing will ever change that, so I didn't have to worry about trivial matters like him being unhappy about something so significant. He stated he was glad I came clean just in time so he didn't marry Emily, because things may have turned out a lot worse. That encounter taught me that I should quit second-guessing myself and, at the very least, be honest with my father. If anything, he is the one guy who can always get me out of trouble, and I need to be honest with him for both of our sakes. Following our chat, he decided to phone Emily and express his displeasure with how she had handled me. He wasn't aware of the post because he and his buddies had blocked her, so they had no idea what she was up to. I was the only one who remained on her friend list, most likely because she wanted me to hear all she was saying, knowing how it would affect me. I had blindly fallen for it all, without considering the repercussions. I was disappointed in myself for being so naive, but my father saw it positively. He assured me I wasn't an idiot, but 16, and that's what I'm going to use to justify all of my poor actions around this time, heh. Anyway, he called Emily, and this time, it was my father who put her on blast. He texted her to see if she was available to chat, and when she answered yes, he called her and confronted her for bullying me with her friends. He warned her that if she harassed me again, she would suffer severe penalties and threatened to report her to the cops. Then he hung up without giving her an opportunity to explain, because she couldn't truly defend her conduct. Update 2. This post comes barely a day after my last one since Emily came to our house this morning to speak with my father, and it did not go well. I'm not sure why, but she still believes she can repair her relationship with my father and reconcile with him, despite what she did to me. Obviously, my father did not open the door when she arrived. He advised her to leave because he had nothing to say and did not want to hear from her. But she refused to leave until she had a chance to speak with him. When I told her she wasn't welcome anymore, she yelled at me, telling me I had nothing to do with anything and should stay out of it. She claimed I was pushing my nose where it did not belong. This time I was not going to back down. This was my house, and she was in my territory now. I yelled back, warning her that if she tried to ruin our weekend, we'd call the cops and have her taken off the property. Unfortunately for her, she did not take me seriously and continued to argue with me, as if this would get her anywhere with my father. She's so unreasonable that she came to reconcile with my father but ended up creating a fight with me, something she knew my father would not enjoy. It was evident that defeating me was more important to her than reuniting with my father, which was heartbreaking. My father actually cared for her, and here she was making a spectacle of herself by arguing with his teenage daughter for no apparent reason other than her irrational hatred of me. After battling with her for a long time, I knew I couldn't continue. She was too illogical and unreasonable to talk to, and it was so frustrating that I couldn't even argue with her properly. She kept blaming me for everything, despite the fact that she was the one who canceled the wedding. I was growing annoyed and didn't want to quarrel anymore, so my father and I simply stopped replying to her. We called the police to have her taken away since we didn't want to waste any more of our mourning on her. She continued screaming after that, but it made no difference to us because we had finished talking to her. When the cops eventually arrived, they arrested her and took her away. I don't think it'll be more than a slap on the wrist for her, but at least she learned her lesson, which I hope will stick. She was truly startled that we had contacted the police, since she had not expected it. It was clear on her face when we walked out of the house as she was being arrested. At some point, she realized we no longer cared about her and began yelling at me even louder than before, which was a daring move given the cops were close there. She was practically demonstrating herself to be insane. She completely lost control and began yelling at me, which shocked even the officers. That's one of the reasons my father filed charges against her, even if it wasn't our original intention. But with her cursing at me, it couldn't be ignored. Her behavior was insane and sad, and I'm relieved she's gone. I sincerely hope she doesn't return because we don't need this in our lives. My father and I have dealt with enough drama to last a lifetime in the last 2 weeks, and we are finally done. Update 3. Hey everyone, it's been about 3 months since the wedding was cancelled. My father and I agreed to take a trip to clear our minds. I'm on summer break right now, and we went hiking, something my mother used to enjoy. I enjoy being in nature as well, so this is ideal for both of us. We've had a terrific time, and I'm grateful that my father and I are actively working to improve our connection. This ensures that past misconceptions do not occur again. At the end of the day, we are all we have, and he is the only family I can rely on. I need to be honest with him and tell him vital things instead of worrying that something will upset him or trying to protect him from things he doesn't need to be protected from. We haven't heard from Emily in a long time, and I truly hope that continues. I know hate is a strong term, but I don't think it describes how I feel about her. According to what I know, after being jailed, she was released but continued to speak negatively about me and my father. I honestly don't care anymore because that's the type of person she is, and we're relieved to be rid of her. It does not matter. I really hate my stepmother, and I don't know how to tell my dad about it without causing a big issue. I'm feeling very stuck right now. Hey, this might be a long one. I'm sorry. It is too long. I didn't read at the bottom. I really don't know what to do about my situation and I don't have anyone close to give me advice, so I thought here I can maybe get some advice. I have an amazing dad who raised me since my mom passed away when I was 5 years old. He is my friend, my supporter and someone who I want to be like when I grow up. When my dad first introduced my stepmom to me I was 10 years old, and she was very nice to me and he looked so happy that we met and hoped we could get along. They got married when I was 13 and I was so happy that my dad and I had a new member in our family. I thought me and stepmother were getting along until I think a few months after their honeymoon she told me one morning that we just need to pretend to like each around my dad, but when he is not here that I shouldn't bother her. Honestly, this shattered me, but I agreed cause I didn't know what else to do. After that day, whenever it was just me and stepmother, she would say things to get to me, and I would just not say anything. I'm introverted and don't like confrontation, so I just took it and thought over time she would get over it, but it got worse. She would talk about my height and weight and say I was a funny looking version of my dad. I hoped my dad would notice, but he didn't. He actually thinks me and stepmother are so close and she understands me. He looks so happy with her that maybe it's worth not saying anything and giving it time. This year my stepmother has started picking on me around my dad and he has either joined in or ignored it. I have voiced that what she says makes me uncomfortable and hurts, but my dad says she is teasing and doesn't mean it to hurt me. Well, right now, I'm at my ends and I'm scared, I'm angry, frustrated at my stepmother and my dad. Dad was away for work and it was just me and stepmother at home. She had a party at home with a couple of her friends. I helped set the house up and cook dinner cause dad asked me to help out, which was fine. After they ate and just hung out, they were hanging out on the porch when I heard stepmother and her friends talking very loudly outside my window while I was in my room. Stepmother friends talked about how lucky stepmother was to have a nice husband and a house. When they mentioned how nice it was that I cooked for them, stepmother told them that I was annoying and weird and she hated me and living with me and couldn't wait till I was 18 to kick me out. I was shocked that she hated me that much, but I didn't know why. TBH. I thought we were tolerating each other, but to hate me I must have done something, but I can't think of what I did. I've been kinda down since that day, which was 2 weeks ago, and I thought I was past the initial feelings, but at rugby training today I bursted into tears and my coach sent me home, so I drove to a beach and cried. I feel so much I honestly can't describe my emotions. I eventually fell asleep in my car. Now I'm here hoping I can get advice on how to talk to my dad about it, cause I'm scared about how he will react. I don't want my dad to be sad cause he does so much for me, but I'm not strong like him. I'm really struggling. My question is, how can I approach this conversation with my dad about my stepmother hating me? Or should I tell him at all? Too long. Didn't read. I heard my stepmother tell her friends she hates me, and I want to tell my dad about it but don't know how. Edit. Someone questioned my dad's age, and I'm sorry. But it was supposed to be 42, but I can't change it. Sorry. Thank you everyone that provided advice and kind words. It means a lot to me. I have read every comment and have an idea on how to approach this situation. I'm honestly terrified of the outcome being negative, but the encouragement and support are making this a bit easier to deal with. I am going to talk to my dad on Sunday and show him this post. I hope it goes well and I hope all of you stay safe and take care. Edit 2. I'm not sure what I am able to do what I planned, cause Amy just took my car keys away and she wants my phone, but I won't give it to her, so she is waiting for my dad to take it off me because apparently I'm doing drugs, but I told her I'm not. I've been at the beach. I'm not sure, but I just want it to stop cause I can't handle it. I'm sorry. Update 1. Okay. So my post was locked, but hopefully it's okay now. I've posted the link and tried my best with spacing. I'm on mobile. If I can't post it, I give up. For all the support and advice received, I really appreciate and wholeheartedly so grateful for all who DM me to see how I was. Thank you. This will be long because a lot has happened, but many things are still not resolved. Trigger warning. I will mention self-harm, so please, if it might trigger you, please don't read further. I wish I was able to say I followed the advice that was provided, and now everything is better, but some things in life don't play the way we want it to, and we can either let it destroy us, or make us better. After writing my edit where my stepmother was taking my things away and assuming I was on drugs, I started recording on my phone and she said a lot through the door, many things about my mom and me, and just plain hateful words that I don't want to repeat on here. I fell asleep while I was barricading the door with my body when my dad demanded that I open the door. At this point, I don't remember much of what happened, but my stepmother told me I had to leave the house, and my dad agreed. I didn't know who to call, but I decided to call my coach and he picked me up, and I was a crying mess. He didn't ask any questions but just told me that I was safe and if I needed to talk he was here for me. I stayed over one night when Dad picked me up. Stepmother was not at home when we got there. Dad told me we needed to talk. We had breakfast and my dad spoke to me about many things my stepmother told him, and I couldn't believe all the lies she told him. It was a long talk, but in summary it was my use of drugs and alcohol. How I disrespect her in our home. I don't do my responsibilities like chores at home. I'm nasty to her when Dad is not around. He asked me why I was acting like this, and if I had a problem with my stepmother I should have spoken to him. I let him talk, and when he was crying and asked if I had anything to say, I was so lost for words. I knew whatever I said my dad was on my stepmother's side. So I told him I wanted him to watch the recording of the incident that I can send through as an email attachment and the link to my Reddit post, and then we can talk more. I also said I didn't want to be here when he was reading and watching, so I'll go for a drive and he can text me when he's done and ready to talk. He was hesitant at first, but I told him it was important to me, so he agreed, and I left in my car to the beach and sent the email with the video attached and the link to my Reddit post. I don't know how long I waited, but many thoughts were going through my head. I was missing my mom so much. And what if my dad still sided with my stepmother? What can I do now? I fell asleep at the beach spot and was woken up by a police officer knocking on my car door and asking for my name. After confirming my name, he advised me to get out my car and to hand over my keys to him and to follow him to his car. He handcuffed me and assured me that I wasn't in trouble. But this was a welfare check cause someone made a call that I was possibly suicidal. I didn't talk after he told me that, and all I remember was just crying. He made me sit in the back of the police car until the ambulance came and they took me to the hospital. I was asked many questions and was evaluated and was told I was depressed and may have extreme anxiety. The physician did say I might have other things but will require further testing and some sessions with a psychiatrist. My dad came and visited me while in hospital, and when I saw him he looked really tired. When he spoke it sounded like he was crying, and he told me he called the police on me because the video recording I did, he heard everything my stepmother said, but he also saw cuts on my thighs and was scared, and thought the worst. Honestly, I never watched the video, so I didn't know my thighs were visible. After our cry we spoke about a few things. I told my dad that I don't feel comfortable living with stepmother after everything she said and done to me over the years, and I'm not sure I can handle being around her cause I don't trust her. We spoke about arrangements and knowing my dad still loves my stepmother and I didn't want him to choose between us. I told him that I could talk to Coach if I could stay with him, and after calling him he agreed. I've also been admitted to an agency that will support me cause I am mentally unwell. I have been to one session and waiting on another evaluation to be done on me and some testings with my general practitioner so they can diagnose me. I'm currently staying with my rugby coach who has been an amazing pillar. He has set out some house rules but I respect the fella and don't mind following them. My coach even set a date next week for me and Dad to catch up on. My coach is an awesome dude. I thought of him as just a coach who just wanted our rugby team to win, but when he allowed me to stay over, he showed so much care for me, and I saw a side to him and understand how much he cares for my team. He has a lovely wife, but I'm kinda anxious whenever it's just me and her at their house. That's it right now. My dad lives at home with my stepmother and is trying to sort that out. I have many appointments to get the help I need and a lot of schoolwork to catch up on and rugby training to attend. I've taken a leave of absence from my Macca's job. I'm gonna miss going to the beach for a while, but I understand that it's not a forever thing, so I hope that the next time I go there I'm not crying my eyes out. I'm kinda working on being okay if my dad and stepmother, after those of you who shared your similar experiences, someday I'll be okay. Thank you to all who advised me and encouraged me. Those who reached out through direct message. Thank you for the kind words and reaching out. I'm not sure if I'll update again, but maybe I'll let you know if something happens in the future. Take care everyone. Also be kind to one another and most of all be kind to yourself, cause you deserve it. Too long. Didn't read. I showed my dad my Reddit post and recording of my stepmother being verbally abusive, and now I'm staying at my coach's house trying to sort out my mental health update too. Hope everyone has been doing well. I wasn't going to update at all, but many who reached out shared their stories and kind words. It truly helped me. I wish I was able to reply, but so many things were happening and I'm sorry. This will be a long one, but it's because this will be the last time, I hope. In my last post my coach sorted out time for me and my dad to catch up weekly. I've met up with my dad twice and this is how it went. First, catch up at the beach. We spoke and I told him a lot about what happened between me and his wife. I mentioned how she would treated me when he wasn't there, what she spoke to me after they got married and how she was awful to live with. I told him how I dealt with it for his sake cause I wanted him to be happy. I mentioned to him that I spoke with the coach about staying there until I go to university, and then I'll move away cause I cannot live with his wife anymore cause I'm not sure what I'll do. I'm never gonna try and get along with her anymore. He listened and was crying and asked if I would ever get over this. I told him no and I never wanted to see his wife and walked off cause I was pissed off at what he said and drove back to the coach's house. He messaged me later. I acted like a kid, and I responded, cause I am a kid. Second catch-up dinner at the coach's house. Second catch-up, my coach invited my dad to have dinner and hang with me. My coach has a pool table in his man cave and a pool. I was excited to hang and catch up with my dad even after our last meetup cause I was feeling a bit better. But at the same time I was feeling anxious about the meetup like I had a bad gut feeling. But I ignored it. Dinner went great, and me, dad and coach had fun playing pool. Later on that night the coach gave us space to talk. Dad talked about my mom and me as a kid. Just things he would tell me when I was a kid, and it was just me and him. It was fun, and I really enjoyed our time together. When it was time to go home I offered to drop him off since he drank, but he said his wife was here to pick him up so I hugged him and he went. I kinda stayed in the garage and waited for her to leave so I could walk in the house, but I heard her say, "How's the little shit?" And I bolted out the door and told her to fuck off. Boy was I not ready for the slap my dad gave me, but all I remember was swinging a punch at him and knocking him down and my coach pulling me off my dad. My coach told my dad and his wife to leave. After they left I told my coach I never wanted to see him again and texted my dad we were done. It doesn't end there. Last week I planned to not go to school on Friday and go for a drive up the line with a few teammates to just get away from everything. They ended up bailing, so I went by myself. I ended up driving to a lake and parking up and just chilling for the school day and just driving back home later on. When I got home at my coach's house I saw my dad's car parked in the driveway and thought I would have to square up with my dad. When I parked up my dad ran out the house and looked like shit. He looked like he cried for days and he started hitting my car screaming to get out the car and tell him where I was the whole day. I thought he was mad that I wagged school so he ripped the door open and hugged me so hard and cried. I had no idea what was happening or what he was saying, but all I could understand was, "I'm sorry, and I love you." After what felt like forever he kinda calmed me down and I asked him why he was here. And then he told me there was an accident with a kid getting hit by a train. And it clicked, my dad thought it was me. He said when he heard the news he called the school and they said I was a no-show and called everyone he could think of. My mates said I went for a drive somewhere but didn't know where, and my dad said he lost it. He calmed down eventually and said he would divorce his wife if I wanted him to. But I told him, he needed to choose that for himself. 'Cause the reason I stayed quiet was to make him happy. If he is unhappy, to make a choice for himself. 'Cause I don't want to be the reason he is unhappy, and that now I have to look after myself, and that is getting away from her, and he cried and just said, "More sorries." He ended up sleeping over in the same room as me that night and the night after, 'cause I think he was scared, and just trying to deal. I was okay with it and coach allowed it. He left after the weekend to sort himself out back at his home. I told him that where I am is good for me, and to not worry, and that I'll turn off Do Not Disturb on my phone so I could see texts. That's pretty much it really. I don't know what my dad is going to decide to do with his wife, but I am definitely not ever going to associate with her. Ever in the foreseeable future. I love my dad too much to stop seeing him, but he knows my boundaries since I've set them out clear as day, and he knows as much as I love him. I will cut him off if I feel like it's not for me. I'm moving past what happened between me and my dad's wife for me, 'cause I'm tired of letting her beat me in my mind, so I just gotta work on myself. I'm currently happy staying with my coach and his wife. They have been amazing and have shown me so much love. They have awesome kids who I have met and they have invited me to their family Christmas. I feel bad that I feel anxious when I'm around the coach's wife, but I'm working on it with my therapist and I have a good support system. I know I want to go to university but not sure if I want to study commerce or law. But I know I am on track with my studies, I just can't afford to skip school anymore. Thank you to everyone who sent messages of support and reached out to share your experiences. Y'all gave me the strength to believe I could get out of this mess and be okay. And if you ever feel down, that there is help out there for you no matter where you are in life. I'm glad I shared on Reddit, 'cause I've learned so much about me and many things I won't forget and teach to my kids. Now I gotta go school. Take care and cheers. OP posted in Mom for a Minute on Sept 27/22 about turning 18. Can't repost from this sub. I hate that my current reality is that I don't have people I can rely on right now in my life. I am trying to do the best to survive and better my current situation. I've had so much happen to me this year and I feel like I can't afford to take time for myself, to catch a break, or else I'll lose what I currently have, which is not much. I know I'm young and have so much to look forward to, but it's hard. Like so hard to want to carry on when so much shit is going wrong. I'm trying to find a place to stay even in a flatmate situation to be more independent, but I can barely afford anything. My job offered me a better paying position at the expense of a full-time job, and even though I would love more money, that means I will have to give up my dream to go university. I know many people have had worse situations, and honestly, I don't know how they found the will and help they got. It really feels like the world just hates me, and I know I'm feeling sorry for myself, but I honestly giving up hope. What can I get the family I'm staying with for Christmas? I, 18 nem, feel indifferent about catching up with my dad, 42 male. I, 18 male, have a strained relationship with my dad, 42 male. A lot has happened this year between us and it really ruined our relationship. He was my best friend, would be there for my rugby matches and push me to do my best. Earlier this year I had a fallout with my stepmom and my dad, which caused me to move out of my home and in with my coach, 37 mem, who I call uncle. I have been here ever since. We did try to mend our relationship, but harsh words were exchanged and I stopped reaching out and focused on passing my exams. I have worked hard on myself by working at my job and helping out at the place I'm staying. I have made some sort of peace about my situation and focused on my future. Now my dad reached out last night to meet up with him to hang, and we planned it for next year on the 4th of Jan. I agreed, and that was that. My uncle talked to me about what me and my dad spoke about. He was kinda worried about my feelings about meeting my dad because of my feelings towards the day. I explained the best I could, is that I just feel indifferent about my dad right now. I am not excited or scared about this meeting, I just see it as a date I'll be seeing him and that's it. Whether we meet up or not, I'm not bothered by it at all. My uncle and his wife care a lot and have done so much for me, so I care about what they say. They think I should have a reason to meet up with him since I haven't spoken to him in a while and worried I could get hurt. Should I have a different mindset towards catching up with my dad? Too long, didn't read. Dad planned to catch up next year for me and him. We had a fallout, so my uncle thinks that I should be feeling something, but I feel indifferent. A commenter asks how it went. Okay, this reply took a while because I wasn't ready to share, but I'm okay for now. My dad turned up with stepmother and told me that they were having a kid. I congratulated them and we spent time talking about my future, and dad telling me he can pay for my university studies as long as I keep my grades up. We spoke about a lot and then we said our goodbyes, and I left. I wasn't able to drive home because I started crying and had to call my uncle to come pick me up. It's been a few weeks since the meeting and now I'm not sure about my feelings about everything, but focusing on getting ready for uni, so I'm working a lot more. My uncle and I are planning to go check out his other house that was affected by floods, so that's something to look forward to because I need a change of scenery. Thanks for checking on me, it means a lot. You'll do well, OP. Go out there and be successful for yourself. Your uncle and wife are really a gem. That's a couple you need to return the favor or love one day. So have you decided what major you will do in uni? OP. Most definitely. They are honestly the best support I have, and I am forever grateful to them both for sharing their home, family and love. Sometimes I wonder why they do it, and they always remind me it's because they care and love me, which means a lot. For uni I am going for a bachelor's in commerce, majoring in commercial law and accounting. Very excited about it and looking forward to it. It will take some years, but that's okay for me right now. The father is not leaving the stepmom and OP is working to move forward. I'm flaring this concluded. My parents tried to screw over my dying stepmother, blew up all of our lives instead. My 17 female stepmother Jane is a wonderful, wonderful woman. She and my father got married when I was 4, and she's been a rock in my life ever since. My mother was always my primary caregiver, but up until that point her relationship with my father was acrimonious and I basically never saw him. Jane was the reason they developed a stable co-parenting relationship. She encouraged everyone to have a good relationship with each other and was always there to support me and my mom when things got rough. Jane was always a really hard worker. When she met my dad, he was living out of a hotel and my mother was doing everything in her power to keep me away from him because she was petty and angry that their relationship didn't work out. Meanwhile, Jane had a great job, a nice house, helped my dad get back on his feet, negotiated a visitation schedule with my mom, who hated her for a long time, and made sure my dad sent us money every week because neither one of them could afford an attorney to negotiate child support payments. Jane had no reason to do any of these things, but as I got older she made it clear that she loved me as much as she loved my half-brothers who were born a few years later. I even have my own room in her house because at the time we lived with my grandparents. Various boyfriends of my mom and Jane felt that I needed a more stable environment than that. She's like the opposite of the evil stepmom. When I was 15, Jane won a big lawsuit against an airline company and got awarded upwards of $1 million. She used the money to build sizable trust funds for me and my brothers so that we would be taken care of later in life. Despite having a lot more money, she still wanted to live a fairly modest life, so she paid off the house she has and has been living there ever since with my dad. Sure, she bought a new car and they went on a few nice vacations, but she didn't blow all her money on stupid things, which I respected. About a year ago, things started getting really weird. Whenever I saw Jane, she seemed to look sicker and sicker, but no one would tell me or my brothers why, even though I knew they knew. All we knew is that she was at the hospital a lot. Around the same time, my mom has been coming around my dad a lot more and acting really strange. Basically like she was trying to romance him. Whenever Jane was in the hospital, my mother would insist on spending the night at their house and playing mom to my brothers, which was so weird to me because she never liked them or Jane. She'd be the perfect little housewife, and my mom is not like that at all. It was super fake. Worst of all, my dad started falling for it. I'm not stupid. I'm pretty sure they were sleeping together. I tried to shield my brothers from it, but they're not dumb either. I tried talking to my dad too, but he insisted it wasn't like that. Then a few weeks ago, my mom started talking about all the places she'd like to visit, how she wanted a new car and was looking to invest. Which is weird because my mom has been a bartender her whole life and has lived paycheck to paycheck since before I was born. She was acting like she was about to get a lot of money, which started to make me really suspicious. Between Jane being sick and my mom acting all nouveau riche, I had a lot of questions. Finally, I decided to visit Jane in the hospital and ask her about my trust fund. I found out that if anything happened to her, that my dad would inherit all the money, including full control of the trusts for me and my brothers. She asked me why I was so interested in the trust fund, so I told her what's going on with my parents, and how my mom has been acting with my dad. I didn't want to, but after everything she did for me, she deserved the truth. It really hurt me to break her heart like that, especially once I found out that she was basically in hospice at this point, because of irreversible kidney failure. She's only got a few more months. We both cried so much. Then, 2 days ago, everything came to a head. My mom stormed in furious and started arguing with my dad. Apparently Jane met with her lawyer and changed the trust so that my dad would get nothing and all of the trusts would be controlled by my stepaunt. She demanded to know how Jane found out about their relationship, and I came out and told them that I told Jane everything. I told them that if they wanted to play stupid games they would win stupid prizes, and that I wasn't going to let them screw Jane over after all the help she gave my family when she didn't have to. My mom slapped me and my dad just looked so defeated. Then my mom told my dad that she didn't really love him, that she was just pretending to so he would marry her and she could get all of the money. The worst part about it is that my brothers witnessed the whole thing, and now on top of their mom dying they have to deal with a cheating dad and his vindictive ex. Our whole family is in ruins and I feel like it's my fault even though I know it's not. Yesterday I visited Jane again and told her about the fallout. She apologized and said that she had to dissolve my trust fund to make sure my mother didn't get a hold of the money, but that as her oldest, I will inherit the house property after she is gone, and that's worth more than the other 2 trust funds combined. My father won't get anything because she's going to divorce him before she dies, and honestly, I'm happy for her. She made me promise to take care of my brothers and told me that once I turn 18 this summer I can kick my dad out of the house if I want to. And I fully plan to do that, BTW. I haven't talked to my dad since and I can't even look at my mom. I can't believe they would conspire to do this to Jane after all this time. Just proof that they deserve each other, and I'm embarrassed that they're my parents. Once I turn 18 I'm going to cut my dad out as much as I can and cut my mom out completely. I hope she rots. Meanwhile I'm going to try and be at the hospital as much as I can until Jane passes away. Anyways, I just needed to vent. I'm really messed up about the whole thing and I feel super betrayed, although I can't even begin to imagine how Jane feels. I'm gonna be so effed up when she dies. I can't even think about that right now. But at least she's not surrounded by people who just want to bring her down. Thanks for reading. Edit. Some people are asking a lot of the same stuff, so I'll just clarify here. My brothers. My plan is to use some of the estate money to fight for guardianship for my twin brothers so that they can live in the house while I kick my dad out. If I can't get guardianship then I will have to let my dad stay in the house. However, once I turn 18 I will technically be an adult, so even if my dad leaves I'm still legally able to be responsible for them. The only thing I won't be able to do is stop him from taking them if he leaves. But they will be 18 in 6 years, so even if they do have to leave they will always be able to come back whenever they want. In a perfect world my dad would just leave and let my brothers stay with me, which I'm sure my bio mom would be very supportive of because right now she hates all of us and I doubt that will change anytime soon. The trust, from what I understand, my brothers will inherit 1/3 each of the estate, and the remaining 1/3 will be used to keep the house running until they turn 18. After that it will be up to me if I want to keep the house or sell it. At that point my brothers will still have money left in the trust so they can branch out or do whatever they want, otherwise I will not sell the house and just pass it on to them or keep it and maintain it myself, and they can just stay with me as long as they need to. Edit to the edit. So I just spoke to Jane and she told me that the reason she dissolved the trust is because originally it was going to be split 3x between us kids, and my dad would inherit the house. She dissolved my third and switched it over to make it to take care of the house maintenance, and instead put the house in my name so my dad wouldn't get it. Plus by doing that at least financially I would be getting a much bigger share. The house is worth about 1.5x the amount of my brother's trusts. I just wouldn't be able to do anything with it until my brothers are 18, which I'm totally cool with. Sorry if I don't have a better answer, but I'm just trying to translate what she told me. My parents. The big fight happened on Sunday and I haven't spoken to either of my parents since. I think they're both at my mom's place right now, but that's fine with us because we're all still mad at them so they can stay gone for all we care. I know technically that's not legal to just leave us alone, but I've been taking care of my brothers for over a year. I can handle a few days while he gets his shit together. Screw both of them. Hope that clears some stuff up. Too long, didn't read. My bio parents tried to screw my terminally ill stepmother out of trust fund money, but she caught on, and now no one on my side of the family gets anything. Additional information from OP on her parents, stepmom's health, trust funds. OP answer. Why isn't Jane on dialysis? I don't remember the exact details, but Jane has a genetic condition where she gets cysts on her kidney. She already had a transplant a few years ago, but now she developed problems with her arteries or something in her legs, so she doesn't qualify for dialysis. She could get another transplant but she doesn't want to because the last time was so traumatic. Rejections, etc. So she decided to just let herself go onto maintenance medications to prolong her death until she gets her affairs in order. She has a few other health problems that make the typical treatments really dangerous, and according to her she'd rather die surrounded by loved ones than on an operating table. Dissolving the trust fund. Jane told me she didn't technically have to do it, but she didn't trust my bio parents not to do something shady and get a hold of the money before I turn 18. Even if my aunt controlled the fund, my dad would still be able to collect if something happened to Jane before I turned 18. Her lawyer suggested it's better safe than sorry and I agreed that it was the best option. I'm not an expert though, I don't know the details. How my mom knew. Like I said before, I'm pretty sure Jane told my dad, who then told my mom, and that's how the argument started. I can't think of any other way and I didn't really care enough to ask. Jane's thoughts on my mom. She didn't know my mom was doing all of that. My mom has her own place and would only come over whenever Jane was in the hospital for a few days at a time. I've been living with my dad for a little over a year, so he probably told Jane that my mom was there to spend time with me, if he told her at all. Besides, she didn't move in until a few months ago, which I guess is when they started hatching their plan. Jane never outright banned my mom from visiting, so there really wasn't anything she could do. Hope that helps. Edit for the last part. The remainder of the money belonging to the estate that hasn't been put into trust for my brothers is going to be used to maintain the house, utilities, taxes, etc., until my brothers are 18, and then I can either choose to sell the house or keep it and maintain it myself if I'm able to. I plan to go to school in that time and get a better job with the goal of keeping the house, but if I can't, then I have the option to sell it. Not that I will, but that's how it was explained to me. OP on her stepmom and their relationship provides thoughts on her bio mom. OP answer. Honestly, it's because she's more of a real mom than my actual mom. My bio mom is kind of ambiguous about my existence, but Jane was always extra involved, sending me to sports teams and paying for dance classes and just showing interest in my hobbies as I got older. Plus, as the only girl, I think we bonded on a level she can't with my brothers, so she always made sure to let me know I was on equal terms with them. When I was younger, we would watch movies and have girl time where it was just us one, and those are some of my best memories with her. Jane is also really mature, and someone I want to be like when I get older, whereas it feels like my mom is a teenager in an adult's body. She was constantly picking fights with my dad about dumb things, and Jane was always there to smooth things over and keep my best interest at heart over her own feelings. I know my mom made Jane's life really difficult for a long time, but Jane never complained or said anything to me about it, whereas my mom constantly complained about Jane. As I got older, I just always felt more at peace when I was around Jane than when I was around my mom. If you want your stepkids to love you, just be there for them and treat them like your own. Ignore whatever drama you have with your husband's ex and just love your kids. Trust me, if you really care about them, they will know. Relevant comments. Commenter. My only advice is make sure you work with a lawyer once she passes so you get your inheritance and your parents can't try to intervene. And then you keep your promise to use that money for you and your brother's welfare. OP answer. Oh, absolutely. Jane already gave me the lawyer's info, and between him and my step-aunt, I'm sure I will be able to do what I need to do for them. I don't even care about the money. Most people don't have trust funds and turn out just fine. I'm actually more glad that she gave me the house, because you can be damn sure it's going to be a safe space for my brothers whether I end up getting custody of them or not. My brothers are basically Jane's legacy, so my goal is to give them the life and guidance that I got from her, and that they won't get because she'll be gone. OP on the relationship between her father and her stepmom before they got exposed. OP answer. Honestly, it hurts a lot because before Jane got sick, they seemed to have the perfect relationship. Until my birth giver, I like that, came in and fucked everything up with her toxic personality. Honestly, in a perfect world my mom will end up broke and alone and in a shitty nursing home with bed sores. And when she calls me and begs me for a relationship, because she needs the attention, it'll feel so good to hang up on her over and over again. OP on Jane, stepmom's health and if Jane is mentally okay on the whole situation. OP answer. I think so. Apparently it's a genetic disease, so she always knew she was going to get sick, she just didn't know when. So mentally I think she was prepared for it. I just hope that she can find peace knowing the truth and knowing that I'll be there to make sure her sons don't grow up all fucked up. OP on her brothers getting therapy to deal with their stepmom's health and her imminent death. OP answer. Yeah. I've already sat them down and talked to them about what's going on. They seem to understand, but they're understandably really sad about the whole thing. I told them that when they go to school they should ask about a grief counselor, and I'm trying to get their health insurance info from Jane so I can find them a therapist for kids. As much as all of this sucks, I think it's brought the three of us a lot closer together. Thanks a lot. I really love my brothers and I know it's my job to take care of them properly now that they won't have a mom around. Jane did so much to raise me and my brothers won't have the opportunity, so it's only right that I help them. Since finding all of this out, my plan has always been to have my brothers live with me. I'm already in charge of taking care of them and the house for the most part. The only thing my dad does is help pay the bills. Unfortunately, I won't be able to kick my dad out as long as he's their legal guardian, which is why I'm trying to find some other solution to that. But if when that gets resolved, he can live under a bridge for all I care. Update. Please check my profile for my previous post. Hi guys, it's me again. A lot of you asked me for an update on my situation with Jane and my family, so I've come back with a few things that have happened since I initially posted. I will try to organize this in a way that addresses the major points of last time. Jane is still alive and doing surprisingly well considering the circumstances. She's always been a fighter, and although her disease has been progressing, she's keeping a positive attitude with everything that is going on. She says she's grateful that she was able to see everyone's true colors before she passed, so she could go into the next life knowing the truth. We have become so unbelievably close in the past few months, and it's getting harder and harder to know that she's getting close to the end. She doesn't ever talk about it though, and I know it's because she doesn't want to hurt me, but we both know the situation, so we're just making the best of our time. I'm also not being completely transparent about all of the drama at home, but TBH, I don't think she needs to hear all of that. We did end up having that surprise celebration of life that I planned. A lot more people showed up than I thought, but they all got an Airbnb near the hospital where Jane is, and we were able to take her out and spend some time at the lake near the facility. It was super low-key, which I know Jane preferred, and I was even able to get her old college friend to come after I found him on LinkedIn LOL. We had food and there was music and we played games, and it was overall a really great time, except Jane started crying at the end, but she promised me it was just because she was grateful. My brothers are also doing okay. My aunt, Jane's sister, is currently paying for them to go to therapy, and they've become a lot more open about talking about the situation. They just turned 13, but a lot of the time it feels like I'm talking to actual adults LOL. They've become really independent lately, in a good way, and aside from me driving them places, I don't really have to do much for them anymore. Their grades aren't super great, but they're not failing, and considering the circumstances it could be a lot worse. They still hang out with friends, and I'm keeping an eye out for like depression symptoms and stuff. The situation with my mom is as funny as it is embarrassing TBH. She spent a few weeks ignoring us, and then she tried to crawl back into my life, basically begging me to let her move in because her lease is about to expire and she has nowhere to go. That convo went about as well as you'd think, and she ended up calling me an ungrateful bitch. And that I couldn't just ignore her because she's my mom. I told her to get out of the house before I call the cops and to go back to my dad, who at that point was only coming home every few days to check on us and grab some clothes. After that, she tried coming by a few times, and when I wouldn't open the door she would lose her mind and start yelling through the neighborhood. After 3 instances of this, I finally called the cops, but because I'm 17 they told me there's a possibility that I would have to go home with her since technically I'm a minor, and need to be with the custodial parent. I told them no way because I was the only one watching my brother's ATM. That led to a whole thing where after a few hours my dad basically showed up and I was allowed to stay there because there was finally an adult present and I'd basically lived there for over a year. After that the cops firmly told my mom that if she keeps showing up and causing drama, my neighbors confirmed that she'd been there a few times screaming, that they would arrest her for trespassing since technically it was Jane's house and not hers. She left and hasn't tried coming to the house anymore, but for a while she would call me constantly telling me I owed her and all kinds of stuff. She's now blocked on everything and anything she needs to say to me gets filtered through my dad. As for my dad, well, since he's basically required to be here for another 2 months until I turn 18, we've basically just avoided each other. It's not too bad though because I've been heavily relying on guilting him for everything to get my way. For example, he was going to contest the divorce but I threatened to kick him out when I turn 18 if he does that, so he just signed all the paperwork for a quickie divorce, and is basically doing whatever Jane tells him to do. I don't openly disrespect him or anything, he's still my dad, but I've made it clear that I have no intentions on doing anything he says ever again and he doesn't fight me on it. Most of the time he's just in his room and sometimes he'll go back to my mom's but only for a day or two before they argue and she kicks him out again. Lol. I haven't decided whether or not I'll kick him out yet and we haven't talked about it either, so I'm kinda playing it by ear. As for me, I'm handling everything as good as I can. I found a new job where I make a little more money, so I've been focusing on saving as much as I can and just being there for my brothers. Between working and school and visiting Jane, I've been so busy I haven't really had time to really stop and think about everything, but I know it'll come. One of my friends has really stepped up and helped me manage everything, and I'm super grateful to him for being there for me and my brothers, so we'll see how that goes. Anyways, I wish I had something more exciting to share, but that's what's happened since my last post. Thanks again for all the support on my last post. Relevant comments. OP on the possibility of her stepmom being poisoned from her parents to get Jane's money. OP answer. Hi there. A few people have mentioned this, and yes, we are absolutely certain she is not being poisoned. It's a genetic disease causing her kidney failure, and we have known about it for a long time, but she shielded us from the worst of it. Hence why her sudden decline in health was such a shock to us. We thought she had more time. My brothers have also been screened for this disease and thankfully neither of them have it. Edit to add. I'm turning 18 in a few weeks, so I don't need to get emancipated, and my dad has already agreed that my brothers will stay in the house with me, because they have nowhere else to go. OP on Jane making video clips for her brothers. OP answer. Yes. Actually, a few people suggested this in my last post and we have been doing this for a few weeks now. Jane has a little digital recorder that she's been putting her thoughts down on, and she's also written a few letters to us for major milestones. My brothers do not know about this as we want to surprise them, but that said, they have been coming to the hospital more now that they're in therapy and able to deal with it. I know they do not want to have any regrets, even though it's a difficult situation. Sister-in-law hated me for years, had a tragic miscarriage. Then we welcomed her back, but she told my child she was his real mom. My sister-in-law despised me for years, but after she suffered a tragic miscarriage, we welcomed her back into our lives. Unfortunately, she began telling my child that she was his real mother. David and I have been happily married for 8 years, and we have a 4-year-old son named Tom. Tom is a lively, imaginative kid. Very attached to me, and a bit of a mama's boy. I cherish this bond, knowing that as he grows older, his interests will change, and he might not want to spend as much time with me. David and I make a great team, managing our home, raising Tom, and pursuing our careers seamlessly. This harmony stems from David's respectful and communicative nature, which has fostered a strong partnership between us. However, despite our smooth sailing, there's an ongoing issue with David's sister, Kathy. From the very beginning, Kathy has been difficult to get along with, maintaining a cold attitude towards me. David had warned me early on that while his parents would likely accept me, Kathy would be tough due to her protective nature. He was right. When we first met, Kathy bombarded me with questions about my background, all the while acting unimpressed and condescending. She would also bring up David's exes in our conversations, comparing them to me as if it were normal. During one dinner, she even suggested David join her and her friends on a girls' trip, claiming he needed to clear his head before committing to me. This remark annoyed me and David noticed, asking her to back off politely. This brings me to a point of contention with my husband. While he does defend me, his affection for Kathy sometimes prevents him from setting firm boundaries. This emboldens her to keep pushing, believing she has his best interests at heart simply because she's the older sister. From that first dinner date, I knew Kathy and I didn't like each other. It stung a bit, but I wasn't about to bend over backward to win her over if she had already made up her mind. Despite this, I always remained polite during our encounters, though she never made it easy. One incident that stands out is David's grandparents' anniversary party. The entire family was invited, and I attended as David's plus one since we'd been dating for a year by then. Throughout the party, I enjoyed chatting with his friendly and easygoing family. The one person who completely ignored me was Kathy. I noticed and tried to stay out of her way. When everyone gathered for a group photo, Kathy loudly pointed me out, demanding I step out of the picture. She suggested David might break up with me and didn't want one of her brother's bimbos in the family photo. I was mortified as everyone around us looked uncomfortable. David tried to argue, but Kathy kept interrupting, saying I was just a random stranger and shouldn't have been at the party. Humiliated, I excused myself to find my car keys, determined not to spend another minute near her. David and his parents followed me, apologizing profusely. His mother tried to persuade me to return, but the moment was ruined. I heard his grandparents scolding Kathy, making me feel even guiltier for spoiling the day. I left immediately, considering breaking up with David, thinking I couldn't handle his sister's behavior. However, David showed up at my place later with flowers and pastries, apologizing sincerely. He told me everyone had reprimanded Kathy for her rudeness, and he had threatened to cut ties with her, which made her cry. David expressed his frustration with his sister's antics and reassured me he didn't want anything to do with her anymore. We had a long talk, and I felt comforted by his support. In the following days, David kept his promise. We stopped seeing Kathy altogether, and he ignored her calls. When she showed up unannounced at his house, he changed the locks and asked his parents to talk to her about respecting his privacy. With his parents' support, Kathy had no choice but to accept that her brother wanted nothing to do with her. We hoped this would make her reconsider her behavior, but it had the opposite effect. Kathy started calling and texting me, leaving threatening messages and blaming me for everything. The breaking point came when Kathy showed up at my workplace one afternoon, demanding to see me. Thankfully, my manager intervened and kicked her out, but the incident left me deeply shaken. I told David that I had no choice but to break up with him to escape his sister's harassment and consider taking legal action against her. David was devastated, pleading with me not to end our relationship and promising he would handle the situation. David then convinced his parents to arrange a meeting with Kathy at their home. During this confrontation, his parents, fully aware of what Kathy had been doing, made it clear they wanted nothing to do with her unless she changed her behavior. They all warned Kathy that her actions were borderline crazy, and if she continued, they would support my decision to take legal action. Miraculously, Kathy finally broke down and admitted she needed help. She confessed to feeling out of control and revealed she had lost her job and had been unemployed for months, worsening her mental state. David's parents took immediate action, admitting her to a psychiatric hospital where she could be monitored. David reiterated that he did not wish to maintain contact with her, which Kathy reluctantly accepted. She sent me an apology text that felt somewhat insincere, but I hoped for her sake that she would heal. When David and I finally married, we chose not to invite Kathy, even though she had been discharged and seemed to be doing better. I wanted nothing to do with her, and everyone respected my decision. Kathy did send flowers to congratulate us, which I appreciated. After we returned from our honeymoon, Kathy announced her engagement. It surprised everyone, as no one knew she had been dating. We were cautiously happy for her until we learned she was marrying a man she met in the psychiatric hospital. This man, James, was schizophrenic and an alcoholic with violent tendencies, according to his doctors. Understandably, David and Kathy's parents were concerned. Kathy planned her wedding for the following month and only invited David, excluding me. While I wasn't surprised and felt relieved not to have to make an excuse, David was offended by the exclusion and chose not to attend. Those who did attend the wedding later told us it was a disaster. Kathy and James were heavily intoxicated during the ceremony and couldn't even properly repeat the vows after the priest. During the reception, James continued drinking until he was blackout drunk, then started ripping open his shirt and pants while everyone watched in horror. Being schizophrenic, James didn't like the attention and suddenly attacked a server, accusing the innocent bystander of looking suspicious and hiding something. His family managed to calm him down and paid off the server to avoid pressing charges. This incident deeply scarred everyone, raising serious concerns about Kathy's safety. If James could attack a stranger, what was to stop him from attacking Kathy? David and his parents tried to talk to Kathy about her husband's disturbing behavior, but she was convinced she could change him. Despite their warnings, Kathy believed James would never harm her. Unfortunately, she was wrong. Over the years, James isolated her, cutting off contact with family and preventing her from seeking help. Though there were instances of police being called due to their violent arguments, Kathy refused to leave him, convinced he was the one for her. 4 years ago, I became pregnant with Tom, and we were all overjoyed. I wanted Kathy to be part of my baby shower, so we sent her an invitation. When we received no reply, David drove to her place to check on her. He discovered that James had cut her off from any communication with us and thrown away the invitation. David confronted James, but Kathy defended her husband, refusing to see his wrongdoing. Frustrated, David left, and we lost contact with her. Even after Tom was born, we did not reach out, and her parents eventually stopped trying to convince her, hoping she would be okay. The past few years with Tom have been peaceful and full of love. David and I have found a wonderful rhythm in our marriage, and Tom keeps us busy with his curiosity. David's parents visit every weekend to babysit while we have our date night, allowing us some time off and giving the grandparents quality time with Tom. Everything was going well until 8 months ago when Kathy showed up at our doorstep, muddy and disheveled, with no shoes on. We immediately let her in, and I fetched her a blanket as she was shivering. We hadn't seen her in years and were at a loss for words. David comforted her, asking if she was okay. Kathy looked numb, staring into space. Eventually, she revealed that she had just miscarried. We listened in shock as she recounted how she had gotten pregnant a month ago, initially believing James would be happy. However, he grew increasingly paranoid, fearing the baby would take her away from him. They fought frequently, and he even threatened to poison her food to cause a miscarriage. That day, she woke up feeling uneasy, and at the doctor's, she found out she had lost the baby. Numb and sick, she couldn't drive home, so she walked, eventually ending up at our house. She must have walked at least 20 blocks barefoot, but she couldn't remember why she had no shoes on. I felt so sorry for her and immediately gave her a hug. At first, she hesitated, but then she hugged me back. We sat there for 5 whole minutes as Kathy cried into my arms. We knew then that this was her way of asking for help. David seemed ready to confront James directly, but I convinced him to call the police and notify their parents, who were better equipped to handle the situation. His parents were incredibly grateful to have their daughter back and assured her of their unwavering support. When the police took her statement, they were as shocked as we were by the abuse Kathy had endured. James was arrested despite his protests and threats, continually denying his involvement in her miscarriage. However, Kathy's toxicology report revealed she had been poisoned, leading to the loss of her baby. In the end, due to James's mental issues and his incompetence to stand trial, the judge sentenced him to an indefinite stay in a psychiatric facility for treatment. Although this was frustrating, we were grateful to have Kathy back safe and sound. By then all my previous animosity towards her had vanished. As a woman, I felt immense sympathy for her and wanted to move past our history to help her heal. Kathy also seemed calmer and no longer hostile towards me. When we felt she was ready, we introduced Tom to her, hoping it would aid her recovery. She grew very close to Tom in a short time, which none of us minded initially. This should have been my first red flag. Over the weeks, she found ways to spend more and more time with my son, often showing up unexpectedly at our house. Staying with her and David's parents made it easy for her to drive over unannounced. She insisted on giving Tom baths and reading his bedtime stories, gestures that initially seemed kind but gradually felt intrusive. Kathy's increasing presence started to feel odd. She visited almost daily, staying longer than necessary, bringing toys and gifts for Tom, and always seeking involvement in his daily routines. She would comment on his clothes or hairstyle, suggesting how Tom would look better, which bothered me. While I appreciated her efforts to bond with Tom, it began to feel like she was undermining me again, this time through my son. My maternal instincts kicked in, and I talked to David. He assured me that I might be overthinking and that his sister was just trying to cope with her pain. He reminded me of her recent loss, making me feel guilty. I decided to let her be, thinking if taking care of Tom made her happy, what was the harm? As days went on, I tried my best to accommodate her constant presence. She started looking after Tom daily while we were at work and even took him to the park in the evenings. Sometimes when I came home, I noticed that my son no longer greeted me with the same enthusiasm. He wouldn't run up to me, and instead, looked at me with curiosity. After Kathy left, I would try to talk to Tom about his day and whether he had any issues with Kathy, but he was less engaged and seemed sad. As his mother, this change in his behavior worried me deeply. However, when I discussed it with my husband, he would gently dismiss my concerns, assuring me that Tom was just growing up and I was overthinking. The nagging feeling persisted, so I confided in a coworker, who suggested installing nanny cams from Amazon in Tom's room and our living room to monitor him. I thought this was a brilliant idea and promptly bought 2 cameras. I didn't inform David about this, not wanting him to dismiss my concerns again. Yesterday, after Tom went to bed, I decided to check the nanny cams. While David watched TV downstairs, I retreated to my study to review the footage, which included audio. Initially, it was just Kathy playing and caring for Tom, appearing very good with children. However, I was shocked when she pulled a book from her purse, one I hadn't seen before. We usually have age-appropriate books for Tom, but this one was different. She read the book to Tom before his nap. As I listened, I realized the story was about adoption and how a mother sometimes gives her child to another mother to care for. Kathy added her own commentary, telling Tom that this was why she had left him in my care years ago because she wasn't ready then. My eyes widened in horror as she continued, claiming that she would always be his real mother and no one could love him more than she did. She kissed his forehead and left him to nap. My hands shook with anger as I realized what she had been telling my son, causing his strange behavior. This poor child must be feeling incredibly confused. I was ready to confront David and demand that Kathy never be allowed in our home again, but I held back. Instead, I decided to take a day off to spend with Tom and understand what Kathy had been telling him. When I informed Kathy that she didn't need to babysit, she reacted anxiously, insisting that she loved spending time with Tom. I firmly told her to back off, wanting a day alone with my child. David asked if I was okay, and I reassured him that everything was fine but that I needed a break. Later, I took Tom to his favorite park, and we spent the day playing, eating pizza, and laughing. I wanted him to feel safe before broaching the conversation about what his aunt had been telling him. He got a bit quiet. I reassured Tom that he wasn't in trouble and that he could talk to me about anything. That's when he opened up. He told me how Kathy had been trying to convince him for weeks that she was his real mother. Though he didn't truly believe it, she also told him that I would eventually leave him because only real mothers love their children. Her insistence made him scared to ask me about it, fearing I might actually kick him out. He said he loved me and didn't want to go live with Kathy. Hearing those words broke my heart. I stared at his tear-streaked face, seeing a small and vulnerable child instead of the joyful and playful boy I knew. I knelt down, gently took his hands, and assured him that everything would be okay. We would get through this together. I hugged him tightly, feeling the weight of his fears and pain. I felt like a failure for not protecting my son from this psycho. I promised him that he had nothing to worry about and that David and I would take care of it. However, my son then told me that David already knew about all this. I asked what he meant and he said, "I asked Daddy, and he knows about this, but he told me not to tell you anything." My blood ran cold as I realized that my husband, despite knowing what his sister was up to, had chosen to protect her instead of our son. He knew everything. I couldn't let my son be around these people anymore. I didn't want him to be confused and frightened about his own mother. I was his mother, and it was my job to protect him from this. I quickly drove home and packed our bags. I told my parents we were coming over and that if David asked, we would say I missed them and wanted to spend time with them. Luckily, my parents are very supportive and immediately said yes. As I write this, I've already explained everything to my parents, and they are as shocked as I am about what Kathy has been telling my son. David did call when he came home to an empty house, but I tried to sound normal, telling him I needed a break from our place and work. He sounded curious, but I assured him I'd stay with my parents for just a few days. We rarely fight, so I guess he didn't think much about it even though my behavior must have seemed strange to him. I am so conflicted right now. I have no idea what to do. How should I confront this situation? Am I the asshole for distancing my son and me from my husband's crazy sister? Update 1. Wow, I woke up to over 600 comments on my post. I can't believe so many people on Reddit have come across my story. I used fake names throughout, so hopefully, none of David's family members will realize it's about him. To those criticizing me for not talking to my husband first, I assure you, I would have if my son hadn't already tried to talk to David. My mother's instinct told me that since my husband knew for weeks about our son's changed behavior and kept gaslighting me, a confrontation with him wouldn't have been productive. I needed to get my son out of the situation immediately, and he is now much safer with my parents. No one can feed him lies here, and that's all that matters. Kathy has been trying to contact me, sending multiple messages insisting she needs to see my son and how much she misses him. I plan to put an end to this at the upcoming family get-together at David's parents' place this weekend. This gathering has been planned for weeks because David's grandparents are visiting, and I thought it would be a nice time to spend together. However, given recent events, I will use this opportunity to speak my truth and ensure Kathy stays away from my son for good. Update 2. I'm back with an update. I finally confronted David as planned during the family get-together. I was so nervous beforehand, but I decided to bring the nanny cam recording as proof. To cut to the chase, I called out Kathy in front of everyone during lunch. She looked shaken and tried to laugh it off as if it wasn't a big deal. Then I showed the nanny cam footage and explained that I had recorded what she told my son. I watched the color drain from her face as I sent the video to the family group chat for everyone to see. Her parents were horrified as they watched her try to convince my son that she was his real mommy. Next, I confronted David and told him how he failed to protect our son. My husband looked really guilty but tried to justify his actions, saying he didn't think much of it and thought it would help his sister cope with her grief. He felt torn between supporting his sister's recovery and telling me about it, ultimately choosing to keep quiet. I told him that because of his actions, I no longer trusted him and couldn't let our son be around him or his family. For the first time in a long while, I saw my husband break down in tears, but I stood firm. I made it clear that I couldn't let my son grow up in a family where his father refused to stand up for him to protect his mentally ill sister. David and Kathy's parents and grandparents apologized to me and assured me they would make sure Kathy stayed away from our son. Kathy looked utterly humiliated but didn't have the decency to apologize. David kept trying to justify his actions, but I ignored him. I left shortly after the confrontation, feeling that my work was done and wanting nothing more to do with any of them. Update 3. I see some of you are confused about my decision, so I wanted to clarify. Yes, I plan on divorcing my husband. I know many of you suggested giving David a second chance since this wasn't entirely his fault, and I agree that he is a good man. However, being a good man doesn't automatically make him a good father. Just because we never had issues doesn't mean he was a good father to Tom. He should have addressed this from the beginning when our son came to him with doubts, instead of spending weeks trying to cover it up and gaslighting me. Both Tom and I can't trust him anymore. I welcomed Kathy back into my life with open arms after what she went through because, as a woman, I felt sorry for her. But in the end, she proved why I never liked her in the first place. I understand that Kathy's abuse was extremely traumatic, but that doesn't mean our son should have to suffer for it. She is an adult with mental issues, and although we thought she had improved, she clearly hadn't. However, what really surprised me was my husband. The fact that he prioritized her mental well-being over our son's shows why he should never be around Tom. He was always such a supportive husband, and I thought I could trust him, but his actions regarding Kathy have shown otherwise. I promise that from now on, I will protect my son no matter what. I am confident I can get full custody of Tom if I expose his family history during the custody battle. After losing my job during the 2020 pandemic, I lived in a camper. Now, my parents are telling my brother to take my house because I don't have a family. My parents told my brother to take my house because I don't have a family. I'm a single man in my early 30s, and my brother, who is 29, already has 4 kids. He became a father at 22, followed by another child a year later, then a third 2 years after that, and his 4th was born just a few months ago. My sister-in-law and I don't get along. She constantly provokes me by acting superior, and when I retaliate, she becomes a dramatic victim, crying on cue and garnering sympathy from everyone around her. Despite knowing her true nature, my parents and brother adore her. I'll admit she's very attractive, but her personality is so awful that I could never be attracted to her. She refuses to work, even though she has a college degree, and my mother takes care of the kids all day. Their finances are solely dependent on my brother, forcing them to live at my parents' house due to their limited income. Privacy is a serious issue with all of them crammed into a 3-bedroom house from the 60s. My younger brother was always the favorite growing up. We're 3 years apart, but he developed a superiority complex because any retaliation from me was met with severe punishment. It was clear my parents favored him, giving him more of everything unless other family members intervened, which they often did. This led my parents to move us 150 miles away from our extended family to avoid scrutiny, resulting in us only seeing them on holidays. My brother was physically abusive, flirted with my first girlfriend until she broke up with me, and laughed at any of my misfortunes. My parents' advice was always to suck it up. They only treated me equally when they wanted to maintain appearances. It was almost amusing to see their discomfort when they had to treat me the same as my brother on birthdays and Christmas in front of others. Our nosy relatives loved gossip, so my parents worked hard to hide the reality, threatening to take away my possessions if I spoke out. When I turned 18, they celebrated my move out, even though I hadn't finished high school. Couch surfing was better than living with them. They didn't attend my high school graduation, but I didn't mind. Since then, I've only seen my parents and brother on holidays like the rest of the family. The 2020 pandemic hit me hard. I lost my job and couldn't renew my condo lease because my roommate also lost his job, and we couldn't afford the rent on unemployment. I loved that 2-bedroom condo. As the lease ended, my roommate moved in with relatives, and I had to sell almost everything I owned to avoid homelessness. I shouldn't have rented such an expensive place, but I enjoyed the high life until it turned on me. I realized I should have chosen a cheaper place to save more money. I came up with a plan. I owned a truck because I love trucks, so I bought a $1,000 camper in good condition and attached it to my truck, planning to live in it temporarily. But I ended up living in it much longer. I initially hoped to park it at my parents' house, where my brother and his family lived. When I asked my parents, they said their house was full and we hadn't gotten along for the past decade. They would only let me park there if I paid rent equivalent to an apartment in my area, which was unaffordable for me as a jobless person trying to save my unemployment money. I might as well rent an apartment with that price. My parents called my camper an eyesore and told me to leave since we couldn't agree. My sister-in-law found it hilarious that I had to live in a camper, and my brother joined her in mocking me, calling me a homeless bum. I parked in a store parking lot that first night, scared out of my mind that someone might try to break in. I barely slept. I had nowhere else to go. Other relatives lived far away and my friends lived in apartments. I was attached to my area and didn't want to leave. I forwarded my mail to a friend's apartment, my only way to receive mail. Finding a stable place to park was quite a challenge. I spent months living a nomadic camper life while searching for a job similar to my previous one. During this time, I encountered numerous difficulties, from dealing with beggars and drug addicts to people demanding I leave because they considered my camper an eyesore. Once someone claimed to be part of an HOA and told me to move, even though I wasn't parked near any houses. When I questioned which HOA, they became aggressive and threatened me, so I moved to avoid trouble. To maintain a steady supply of electricity, I learned to use a long extension cord to recharge my camper batteries by plugging into any available outlet. This often meant sneaking around and using an outside outlet of a random building while parked on the street. Though I know it's not ideal, I needed to keep my refrigerator running. I had a small solar power bag for my phone, but I didn't have a generator, which would have been noisy and required fuel. So I did what I had to do. After months of this lifestyle, I finally secured a new job. I had to move to a neighboring city to find a non-retail job. I had promised myself never to work retail again after college, but I was close to breaking that promise. Although I was still receiving unemployment benefits, I had no stable place to live and didn't want to be jobless when the benefits ran out. Plus, I was incredibly bored with only reading, watching movies on a small portable DVD player, using my phone or laptop, and keeping track of where I could park and use public bathrooms. I envied the Japanese for their public bathhouses, which we could really use here. When I landed the job, I practically lived in the back lot of the building, in old employee parking spaces by the warehouse that no one else used because they were so far back they were almost forgotten. My boss, the company owner, liked this arrangement because I was always available for any shift as long as I had enough sleep. He even let me detach the camper from my truck and set it up in one of the spaces so I could drive around without it. I'm not sure if this was legal, but no one bothered us the entire time I lived there. I had few issues with trespassers, the security guards handled them. I was essentially on call all the time and worked nearly every day. My boss allowed me to plug my camper into the building for power and water, and I paid a small rent by working for free on Sundays, when the office was empty except for the janitor and security guard. I showered at a friend's apartment or at my local gym since the camper had no shower and only a portable toilet. I avoided using it to keep from having to empty it, a nasty chore, so I used other bathrooms whenever possible. I had a key to the warehouse and could use the bathroom there at any time. I became close friends with the night security guard. Heating the camper in winter was easy with a small electric heater, but summers were tough. Without AC, I got a used portable air conditioner to make it bearable. I earned a lot of overtime and learned new skills from my coworkers. Eventually, midway through the year, I was promoted to supervisor and started earning a better salary. This made me realize I needed a stable long-term living situation. I found a 3-bedroom manufactured home on a small property just 2 miles from work. I bought it for $10,000 less than the asking price, using nearly all my savings for a down payment and getting approved for a home loan. I no longer had to live in a camper. There was enough space to park my truck and set up the camper in the backyard, where it could serve as an extra space if needed. Once settled, I made the mistake of bragging about my new home on Facebook. My family saw the post, and that's when things got complicated. A few weeks later, my parents and brother, along with his family, showed up unannounced for a tour. I hadn't given them my address, so I still don't know how they found me. None of my friends admitted to telling them, and no family had visited me before, so I suspect they may have followed me home from work. It wouldn't surprise me. Once I opened the door, they practically barged in like a horde of overexcited tourists, immediately making themselves at home. They nosed around everywhere, And my sister-in-law kept flashing me this unsettling smirk. It wasn't until later that I figured out why, and it made me angrier than a bull on steroids stung by a hornet. My parents kept talking about how much extra space I had and how it was too much for someone like me who had no wife or kids. Sure, not now, but maybe someday. My brother kept pointing out that my house had more space than our parents and was closer to his job. Red flags all around, I know. Eventually, my brother, let's call him Dan for simplicity, asked to speak privately. Everyone else suddenly left the room and gathered on the front porch, making me realize they had planned something. Dan said the house was too much for me alone and suggested that he and his family move in because his wife was pregnant with their fourth child and my house was much closer to his job. He pointed out that I already had the camper, so I could just live in that while they took the main house. Not once did Dan mention offering rent, even though he had a good job. He also talked about making changes and setting curfews, saying I couldn't just walk in any time without notice. If it weren't my brother, I would have thought he had lost his mind. But Dan had long since gone off the deep end, thanks to our parents treating him like the center of the universe. I tried to speak, but he kept talking over me, as if I had no say in the matter. There was no way in hell I'd rent my house to him or his insufferable wife. I might consider renting to others to help pay off the mortgage, but not to them. I had seen stories like this online but never thought it would happen to me. Yet my parents, brother, and sister-in-law were a perfect fit for the roles of entitled narcissists. So I picked up my phone, set it to record, and held on to it. Dan didn't notice or care. He kept waving his arms and listing all the reasons why he needed my house. He acted like it was a done deal and even tried to shake my hand. That's when I finally stood my ground and said, "Hell no," loud enough that Dan stumbled backward. I rarely raised my voice to him like that, as I was usually punished for it by our parents, but this was my house, not theirs. My resolve was unyielding. I stood up and told him that my house was not up for grabs, and acting like he could move in just because they wanted it wouldn't change that. I bought my house for myself, and it wasn't my fault he kept having more kids and had to live with our parents because he couldn't afford to move out. Dan got as close to me as he could without touching me and said I didn't deserve the house and that he needed a better place for his family. I laughed in his face, saying that was total bull because I worked hard to buy my house. Of course, I deserved it. Dan started yelling that I had no wife or kids and didn't need all the space, so I might as well give it to him. I told him I wasn't giving him anything, and he hadn't even offered to pay rent if he moved in. I'd still be covering the entire mortgage on my own house without being able to live in it. Then Dan said he shouldn't have to pay rent because his family came first. After I kicked my parents, brother, and sister-in-law out for trying to force me to hand over my new house, I immediately went on social media and told the whole story to the family. It spread quickly, but you won't find it now because it has since been deleted and my profile is private. I posted about it because I knew my family would twist the event to make me the villain, and I was right. But I had about an hour to get my side out first, and I had video evidence to back up my story. No, I don't plan on showing the video here, so don't ask. Being proactive paid off because I got a decent number of family members on my side right away. My parents, brother, and sister-in-law must have planned to write their own post, but it was too late, so they didn't even bother trying to lie much. They had a few supporters, but not many. Most of our family already knew how entitled they were, so they quickly understood and accepted what happened. One person, whose identity I don't know, called me to rant that I was a horrible brother and needed to make way for a real family man. I just ended the call and blocked the number. It didn't happen again. The week went by and my parents showed up with Dan on my front porch, just as they said they would in their ultimatum. They rang my doorbell like crazy and pounded on the door until I finally answered. I opened the door just a crack, and they tried to shove their way in again. But I had installed a couple of latch chains and braced my body against the door. My father and brother demanded I let them in, but I said I was recording everything on camera and would call the police if they tried to force their way in again. My mother calmed them down and, in her most sickly sweet tone, asked if I was ready to let my brother move in. I told them to f off and never come back. My mother put on the crocodile tears and asked why I couldn't just do this for Dan because he's my beloved brother. I laughed and bluntly said I don't love him as a brother because he treated me like crap for years, and they encouraged him to do so. They are terrible parents, and he is a terrible brother. Then I told them to leave or I'd call the police ASAP. They all left surprisingly easily, apart from my mother's loud crying and the others giving me dirty looks. One could say making them leave was suspiciously easy. I thought the whole mess was over, but I should have taken them more seriously because they had other stupid plans. I came home later that week on Friday evening to find a moving truck and my brother's minivan parked in my driveway. It was Dan and his family. They were moving stuff in. He waved at me with a crap-eating grin. I was furious and told him and his family to stop, but my sister-in-law smugly said that, like it or not, they were moving in. Then, in the most fake way, while tilting her head and puckering her lips, she said it was okay because my mommy allowed it and I should always listen to what my mommy tells me. I seethed with rage just hearing those words and looking at her smug face, so I locked myself in my truck and called the cops right away. When they realized what I was doing, my sister-in-law started pounding on my window and yelling at me to stop, saying I couldn't do this to her because she and Dan needed the house. She cried, "Why can't you just do this for Dan?" I responded, "F Dan, it's my damn house, not his." Then she threatened to key the side of my truck unless I stopped calling the police, all of which the 911 operator heard thanks to the window being slightly open. I told my sister-in-law that if she damaged my truck, I'd sue her, and she was smart enough to retreat. When the police arrived, Dan, my sister-in-law, and their kids had locked themselves in my house. I explained the situation to the cops and showed them my new driver's license with my current address. When we approached the front door, I noticed they'd changed the lock, and the old one was lying on the porch with the center drilled out. The drill and a Harbor Freight drill bit set were left right next to it. Could they have been any more foolish, leaving evidence out like that? I pointed out the broken lock and the drill, then detailed the events that had transpired. It seemed Dan had called our parents, as they showed up while I was talking to the cops. My parents immediately lied, claiming I had agreed to rent my house to my brother and his family. I countered, saying that was an easily provable lie. Dan and my sister-in-law finally emerged from my house with some papers, looking smug as if they'd outsmarted me. They had drawn up a fake rental agreement, but my signature wasn't on it. There was a signature, but it didn't resemble my handwriting at all. I doubted they had ever seen my signature, which was incredibly stupid on their part. I pointed out that it was blatant fraud and that if the cops investigated it would be clear. I warned that going to jail and court wouldn't benefit them, and it could even make Dan lose his job, his only means of supporting his family. I also mentioned I would get a lawyer and sue for damages if anything of mine was lost, stolen, or broken, and I'd call CPS for good measure. Dan turned white and looked terrified, but my mother stepped between us, insisting I should do this for Dan and live in the camper so they could have a family home. I shouted at her that if she thought it was such a great idea, she should let Dan have her house instead. The cops separated my mother from me and I loudly demanded they all leave immediately, or I'd press charges. I declared that they drilled out my lock to break in. The lease papers were obvious fakes, they badly forged my signature and I had recorded video of my sister-in-law attacking me. These were felonies I could ruin their lives with if I wanted, and if they didn't leave, I would do just that. The only reason I hadn't already was for Dan's kids, so they had one chance to get out. My parents finally realized they couldn't force me to give in. My mother surrendered, saying she'd put an end to this. She spoke quietly to my sister-in-law while my father talked to Dan. My sister-in-law instantly started crying loudly, ripping up the fake rental papers into tiny bits and tossing them like confetti, only to have an officer tell them to pick up the pieces or be cited for littering. The cops had, "I don't get paid enough for this," looks on their faces. Dan had to start telling his kids to load their stuff back into the moving truck. The kids were all crying, with the eldest sobbing that he wouldn't get his own room now. My sister-in-law and Dan tried one last pathetic attempt to guilt me with a sad family routine, gathering in a group hug facing me. They must have practiced it beforehand. All the kids had the same pleading look with quivering mouths. My sister-in-law kept rubbing her pregnant belly and tilting her head to look pitiful, and my brother made the saddest face he could, saying, "Please don't do this. We need to be able to live here." But I didn't budge and told them to keep packing. All the kids and my sister-in-law turned up the crying, and Dan yelled, "Are you satisfied with yourself? You've denied us a home because you're too selfish to share and help out family." I laughed like a maniac and retorted that what he was trying to do was taking, not sharing, and no amount of crying would make me let his family move in. He was no brother of mine anymore. He was just an entitled prick who thought he could take whatever he wanted from me like when we were kids. Dan started F-bombing me until the cops warned him to cool it or he'd end up in cuffs regardless of whether I wanted to press charges. He looked both scared and supremely pissed off. I asked the cops if they could stick around until my parents, brother, and sister-in-law had all left, and they said they weren't going anywhere until the situation was resolved. In fact, within a few minutes, the 2 cops became 4 as more arrived for some reason. That gave my parents extra incentive to get moving. I made Dan give me the keys to the new lock he'd put on my front door, although I got a new lock the next day anyway because I didn't know if he had copies of the keys. He was really reluctant to hand them over and ended up throwing them down the street and into a storm drain, telling me to get them myself. One of the cops scolded him for that and made him retrieve the keys. Dan had to pull off the grate to get at them and got pretty dirty in the process. When he finally got the keys back, he grumbled and then slammed them into my hand. I then told them all to leave and never come back. My mother threatened to disown me for this, as if that were some kind of threat. I voiced that to them, and in an overly sarcastic tone said something like, "Oh no, that means I won't get to come to any holidays with you guys where I always get treated like crap because Dan has always been your favorite. You treated me so badly growing up that if Dan ever needs an organ donor, I wouldn't give him anything. So do like you always told me when I was mistreated and suck it up." Final update. My parents told my brother to take my house because I don't have a family. I waited until after the new year to make an account and post, just in case more stuff happened, and it did. As previous readers know, my sister-in-law was making passive-aggressive posts on social media clearly directed at me, especially after she had her fourth baby in November. She kept posting the same repetitive nonsense, finding semi-clever ways to reword it but essentially complaining about living with my parents, the lack of space, and needing her own house. I know I sound dismissive, but after what I've been through with these people, you'd be ready to sarcastically play tiny violins in front of them too. They're just that bad. Since I waited until January to post, more happened, just as I thought. I mentioned before that I'd invited half the family for a Christmas Eve party at my house. Everyone I invited came, even though it was a 3 to 4 hour drive for them. They wanted to come and show their support. They praised me for working hard to get a house on my own and apologized for everything I'd been through. They asked why I didn't just take my camper and drive 3 hours back to them instead of living nearly homeless for so long, and I had to sheepishly admit I was very attached to living around here, where my best employment opportunities were. My hometown doesn't have many great job opportunities in my field, if any, and I wanted to make my own way as much as possible. An answer they overall accepted. We moved on to having a really nice party, the best I'd had in years. Some relatives brought CDs of great Christmas albums, and my favorite was the one my uncle brought of Ray Charles. He sings Christmas songs like no one else. It was a grand and happy time. I felt like, for once, I could just forget my past issues and enjoy the moment. But I wouldn't be writing this if it had stayed that way. About 2 hours into the party, you know who showed up. My parents, brother and sister-in-law walked in trying to look all smiles. They didn't even knock, just walked right in like they belonged there. I shut off the music and told them to leave immediately. They begged to stay and said they brought gifts. One of my uncles stood up and yelled at them before I had a chance to speak. He said they didn't deserve to be in my home or my life after the crap they pulled months earlier, and several other relatives backed him up. This uncle, my mother's brother, used to adore her until he found out about the stuff that went on between me and my parents. My grandparents, my mother's parents, as old as they are, hurriedly stepped in and told my parents that if they wanted to make amends with me, it was far too soon. They expressed their immense disappointment in them for the past year. They'd hidden their favoritism for my brother from prying eyes for a long time, but no one was fooled anymore. They needed to make a serious effort to treat me like a son if they ever wanted to be in my life again. Then they turned to Dan and my sister-in-law and said they were tired of the repetitive nonsense my sister-in-law kept posting. They told her to let it go already because my house would not become their new home. My sister-in-law reverted to her usual crying routine, throwing a tantrum about how she should be the one living here and not me. She sat down and complained that it wasn't fair I had this house to myself when I had no family, while she had 4 kids that needed more space. She just wanted a better place to live and feel like a real mom. It was petty of me, but I loudly pointed out that she sucked as a mother because she let my mom do most of the parenting while she sat on her butt all day, playing on her phone or spending all of Dan's money. She had the nerve to complain about it. I even joked that I was surprised her baby didn't get drunk from her breast milk since she drank so much booze. That comment got me some stares. My sister-in-law demanded to know if I was calling her a bad mom. I said the evidence speaks for itself. If she wanted to afford to move out of my parents' house someday, she needed to use her college degree, get a job, and save money. My mom already did most of the childcare for my brother's kids, so she'd have plenty of time after her baby got a little older. My brother's eldest, a 7-year-old, ran up and started kicking and screaming at me for yelling at his mom. He kept at me about how his mom said I was the bad guy who made her cry and didn't let them live here. My brother pulled his son away, but the other relatives jumped back in, and it turned into a family intervention against my sister-in-law and brother. She was crying, her new baby was crying, her kids were crying, hell, even Dan was nearly in tears from the verbal lashing he was getting. He ended up just sitting on the ottoman by the front door, looking like a complete wreck. He couldn't look anyone in the eye. He couldn't even say 2 words to me, Not with a house full of angry people ready to judge him if he tried to act like the golden child again. If they weren't there to hold him back, I bet this would have ended up like when he tried to take my house months earlier. By this point though, he'd been so thoroughly humiliated that his and my parents' reputation in the family was completely destroyed because the masks were off. Soon after, my parents, brother, and sister-in-law all left in defeat. The party resumed, and we all avoided speaking of what had just happened for the rest of the evening. Since most of the adults had been drinking, everyone stayed the night at my house. I even let some of them sleep in the camper to ensure there was enough space. It makes a good guest house. My relatives had wanted a tour of it earlier and couldn't believe I'd been living in it for around 2 years. They asked a lot of questions about what summer and winter were like and so on. I was up earlier than everyone else on Christmas morning and had a fresh pot of coffee and some ibuprofen ready for those suffering from spiked eggnog hangovers. They complimented me on being a way nicer host than my parents ever were, and we all agreed to do this again next Christmas. After Christmas, my sister-in-law finally stopped making posts that were obvious digs at me and even deleted the old ones. But shortly after the new year, she posted again, complaining about how she tried to convince my parents to get a camper like mine so it could be set up in the backyard. That way, Dan and his family could use the whole house as their family home. My parents vehemently turned down that idea. They were not going to be pushed out of their own home, let alone their master bedroom. The post was only up for a couple of days before my sister-in-law removed it, and she has hardly posted anything since. She loves to complain, but if a tree falls and no one is around to hear it, can it still complain? My sister-in-law seems to have realized there's no point in doing it when no one is listening. And Dan can't afford to move his family out on his salary alone anytime soon. If they end up expecting another child in the next few years, I won't be surprised. Things have mellowed down for me since then, and I've even invited friends over for a poker night. I suck at poker because I can never remember the rules, but so what? We get to drink beer and eat junk food while being merry idiots. We loaded up on Whoppers from Burger King and just had a great time, enjoying the evening and getting pleasantly drunk. I think maybe around summer I'll look into possibly dating someone. I'm not exactly getting younger, so fingers crossed that goes well. My camper just sits idle in my yard now, and I admit there are days I go out there just to spend time in it. After living in it for 2 years, it feels like my second home. Maybe one day I'll actually use it for camping as intended. I've never been camping. My parents considered it a waste of time, so it would be a completely new experience for me. This pretty much marks the end of what happened. My parents, brother and sister-in-law have been staying clear of me. In fact, they've gone back to acting like I don't exist, just like before I bought a house. Not that it bothers me at all, it's better this way. But they'll inevitably come back in some way. I know they will. I just wonder what kind of stupid thing they'll do next. If anything notable like this happens again, I'll make another post if this account is still active. I yelled at my wife that having a child with her was the biggest mistake of my life and that she had made me miserable. Now, I regret my words. Repost as my last post got removed. I have been with my wife for 4 years. I have a 5-year-old from a previous relationship. My 5-year-old, Leah, is from my first long-term relationship during college. We split shortly after her birth, as my then partner admitted to being unfaithful and not being ready to start a family. My daughter loves my wife. They are inseparable. My ex does not have much to do with my daughter or myself except cause the occasional drama. She did not want any custody or visitation time, so my wife is her mother for all intents and purposes. My wife is almost 8 months pregnant. She has shut me out of the entire pregnancy but refuses to admit anything is wrong. I feel completely ignored and hurt. When we first learned she was pregnant, she told me while I was making breakfast. Of course I was elated. However, since it was an unplanned pregnancy, I asked how she was feeling at first. She began smiling and crying about how excited she was. I picked her up, gave her a million kisses, and told her I was so excited to have a baby too and what a wonderful mother she would be. All good, right? She went all out to announce it to everyone else. Balloons and boxes, t-shirts and best big sister mugs. I assumed the casual announcement with me was because she wanted my feelings on growing our family before celebrating. However, when her sister asked about how I liked my box, my wife quickly said, "He didn't get one, this isn't his first rodeo." It was like pulling teeth to get her to let me go to the ultrasound appointments. She didn't want me to miss work, didn't want to interrupt Leah's routine, excuse after excuse. When it came to listening to the heartbeat, my wife instantly started crying happy tears. The tech was telling her how strong the heartbeat was, how precious our little one was, etc. I was feeling a bit emotional and cleared my throat to prevent crying. The tech said, "Aw Dad, Isn't that sound beautiful? My wife immediately said, this isn't his first child. It's not that special for him. I immediately said this is one of the most important moments of my life. I can't think of anything more special. The atmosphere was clearly awkward after. Another thing that bothered me, I heard Leah and my wife's mom laughing in the living area. I was in the kitchen making dinner. When I walked in and asked what the fuss was about, Leah was touching my wife's stomach and was laughing with excitement that the baby was moving and it would be so cute. My wife let my daughter and Mill feel the baby move before me. I was hurt but simply said how happy I was. Later that night, my wife was poking her belly and laughing. I asked her to feel as well and she said, you felt Leah move as a baby. What can be better than that? She was the cutest baby ever. She has felt pretty poorly throughout her pregnancy, but refuses to let me help her. If I bring her a snack and drink, she offers it to our daughter. If I try to rub her feet or legs, she asks me to play with our daughter so she doesn't feel like she is being replaced or ignored. I simply do not ignore my daughter. We have bonding time. I'm an active parent but I want to love my wife. She can hardly eat but when I asked her what I can prepare for her, it's whatever Leah wants. We went to the zoo with Leah, and my wife started feeling bad. She had cramps and was considering going to the hospital, severe nausea and dizziness. I carried her to a bench nearby and she began to cry saying she can't even stand up. I told her let me call an ambulance or I'll carry you to the car and drive you. She said she didn't want to ruin Leah's trip and we didn't even make it to the aviary, Leah's favorite part. I said I wasn't leaving when she asked me to continue to go through the zoo with Leah. We sat for a while until her dad showed up. She didn't even tell me he was coming, and he took her to the doctor. I was shocked, and followed them with Leah. When we arrived, Leah was upset about missing the aviary and pouting. At that point the health of my wife and unborn child were my concern. I really didn't care that Leah was upset. My wife was irate that I made Leah miss out. Another example, we were watching Leah play in a local kids sport. I asked her, do you think our kid will be athletic, artistic, enjoy science or math? She said, this is Leah's moment, we shouldn't make it about someone who isn't even here. Leah was on the field, we were sitting in the stands. We had both waved to her, held up a sign for her, everything. I just wanted to talk about our baby. When her bump was really showing, she would always show it off to anyone who wanted to look. Her family, friends, siblings, etc. Do you want to see my bump? I'm huge, so excited, I can't believe it's only X more weeks. They all touch her bump, talk to it, etc. Her parents come and read or tell back in the day stories. They go to the beach? 1,000 bump pictures posted on her friends' social media accounts, so ready to be an honorary auntie. Her sister wife puts the B in bump and beautiful. If we go out together. She wears the loosest clothes so I don't see it. I'll even see her pull her shirt down when she sees me come into the room. She sat on me the other day after being playful in bed. Her bump was right in my face. I ran my hands up it and said, you are the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, you already are a great mom to Leah. I can't wait to see you as our family grows. This was one of the first times I was really able to feel her bump so I rested my hand there and said I love you so much already, I'm so excited to meet you. I hope you have your mom's eyes. She moved off of me and said, I know ex-partner had a bigger bump than me. I bet it was fun seeing Leah move all the time. You don't have to act like you care, I know you've done this before. I said I don't think about it that way. Leah is special, but this is a completely new and different special because it was with her and our baby was someone completely new and special. She began to leave the room and I could see her shoulders shake from crying. I am 100% positive she is not cheating, nor has she ever. I just can't wrap my head around why she doesn't want me to be happy about this. The rest of the time is completely normal as long as I don't mention the baby. She is affectionate, initiates intimacy, brags about what a good husband I am and how great I've made this pregnancy. We plan for our future, have date nights, everything else. Unfortunately, we had a fight where I snapped. I had a break between clients at work, so I went to a local baby store and got a lot of things she had planned for the baby and nursery on her Pinterest board. I came home and surprised her with flowers, a prenatal massage certificate, and her favorite food, as well as the baby items. She seemed very grateful, but when I came home, editor's note, OOP meant when he got home after going back to work again, the items were no longer there. She said she returned it to buy Leah stuff, as she was going to feel left out. I lost it, I cried for the first time in our marriage and yelled that having a child with her was the worst mistake I've ever made, that at least my deadbeat ex at least gave me the chance to know my unborn child. That I didn't care about the baby because she wouldn't even let me bond with it, I do care, have since she told me. That I hope she was as miserable as she made me and that she better be prepared for a custody dispute. She is a SAHM for Leah. She simply said, I know you don't care about the baby, but I'll die before you take my baby from me. What? I have begged her to let me interact with her, our baby. I asked her if her therapist had any insight on why she was being like this. She said no, that she isn't doing anything. I told her what I said above and she said I had those experiences already so it shouldn't matter. I asked her if the baby was mine. I know it is, I was just being mean. She threw her phone at me and said yes, go through it. I'll do a paternity test, whatever you need. I just called her parents and asked them to go to our house as we were having a disagreement and went to a hotel. I do not want to stress her or our unborn child, and I really want to repair this but I truly don't know how. I'm staying at an Airbnb for now until we can figure this out, but I truly don't know what to do. I miss her like crazy, and I can't even begin to understand why she wants to behave this way. I have apologized for what I said, but I can't take back what I said and I worry about when our baby will be born if she will even want to be a family with me, or let me have anything to do with our baby. I spoke with a mutual friend who says she is very distraught and says she can't be a single mom, loves me, but her actions prove the opposite time and time again even when I beg for change. Relevant comments. Why did you say those things? OP, downvoted. I said those things because I wanted to hurt her like she has been hurting me. It's as simple as that. I regret it. I have apologized. She has told me time and time again you shouldn't care, and I told her whatever I thought I could to hurt her. It was childish and immature of me, and it was a knee-jerk reaction. I hadn't planned on saying any of that. Commenter. Yeah, I can understand why you're angry. Has she explained why she has been saying those things? Resentment is a weird thing. She may not have even realized she had that until she became pregnant, but I do think that if that was something she'd been feeling, that it's something she should have spoken to either you or your therapist about. OP. Nothing. I've begged her to talk to me about it. I've told her we can go to counseling together, and guess what her response was? She cried and asked if I was unhappy in our marriage. I said no, I want to be more involved with you in this pregnancy. You've left me in the dark. I asked if she was unhappy. Did she want a divorce? Decide she doesn't want this baby? More tears, seemed genuinely hurt. I would even think that. Makes no sense in my mind, apparently I should just stand on the sidelines. Commenter, is it possible she's resentful of your 5-year-old? What's your relationship with Leah's mother like? OP, I truly don't think she is resentful. She adores my 5-year-old and I think she is probably the preferred parent. She takes her to the park, museums, mommy and me painting. Shows up to school events, muffins with mom etc. without fail, takes care of her when she's sick, plans our vacations out around my 5-year-old's interests. Her cousin had said something about not bringing her stepdaughter before, and my wife completely freaked and said that we don't use titles around here that make us feel like we aren't one family. She is my daughter and nothing less and will not be excluded, type thing. When she was first pregnant we took a short trip to see some of her family and she cried every day about missing Leah. She is in therapy and has been since we met for anxiety and depression, but it is clearly no help. I have brought up prenatal depression at her doctor's appointment but she really doesn't match as she is elated unless I specifically bring up the baby. Downvoted comment about seeing an attorney because he probably won't be allowed at the birth and they should just get divorced. It's definitely a fear in the back of my mind. I know Leah will be devastated. My wife already mentioned wanting her mom in the delivery room since I've already seen my kid being born, that it would only serve to embarrass her if I'm in the room this time. Commenter, you two need couples therapy immediately. You should have started it after her first or second comment. You've known for months things weren't right. Also, call her OB and explain what's going on. Ask them to make a record of her shift in behavior and stress that she's never done anything like this before getting pregnant. OP. I stupidly attributed it to hormones and other issues that come with pregnancy. She was sick for most of her pregnancy and for a lot of it actually lost weight, was constantly hungry but couldn't eat and became very body conscious. She is doing much better now and is a healthy weight and I genuinely thought it would get better. It's much easier to see in hindsight that the first few comments were deeper than that. Commenter, why the fuck did you say all that shit? She was acting really off, for sure, but you really fucked up. That's some awful, very possibly unforgivable stuff you just said. And you seemed like such a decent guy. OP, I am an idiot. I did fuck up, and I have apologized, not that it means much to her at this point. I said whatever I could say to hurt her. It was months of resentment building up. Months of begging for her to tell me what's going on, to let me in, to let me think of baby names with her. I was and I still am hurt. I hope it can be repaired, as I would like to be there for her and be a full-time father to my child. It breaks my heart to think of splitting custody time. OP clarifies his relationship with Leah and the aviary event. OP, I absolutely did not care that we did not see the aviary. We go to the zoo regularly and I had promised we would go back. When your pregnant wife is so ill she begins crying that her legs don't work and she can't walk and begins saying she thinks she might die due to such strong abdominal cramps, you're not concerned with missing the aviary. I did not tell my child I did not care. I told my wife in the hospital that her and our unborn child's health became before birds and that Leah can pout and be mad until we were certain she and our baby were okay. We do everything for Leah. Leah and I have bonding time both with and without my wife. Together we enjoy fishing, going to the arcade, and playing Barbies. My daughter is confident in our relationship. Just the other day my dad said he didn't want to play horses with her anymore and she of course said, "Fine, I know Dad will always play with me." I absolutely have not and never will neglect or abuse my child. This is such a far reach because I was concerned more about my wife than my daughter going to an aviary. To another commenter, she is 5, and is very smart. She knows that the hospital and ambulance are things people need when they are very sick. She completely understood my wife felt bad, even said I needed to get her tummy medicine so we could keep going. I didn't say, "We are leaving," cry about it. I did tell her we were following Mom and Grandpa to the DR because Mom was feeling very bad, and that we can come back another day and said when Mom feels better we will get her an ice cream since she didn't get to see the birds. She pouted, all kids do. Did she see that I was more concerned with my wife? Yes. She even commented that Grandpa seemed upset. We live in a hot and humid climate and my wife went from red and using a fan to pale white and saying she was cold. It was scary for me. When you arrive at the hospital and want updates. Are you okay? Is the baby okay? And your wife is miffed that you didn't take your child to an aviary and that's all she wants to talk about is that she is pouting. It hurts. Commenter. And for someone who is a self-proclaimed good husband, why has he not addressed this with his wife before? If she is acting so out of character, and showing odd behaviors, why has he not talked to her about it? Every in-tune partner would be scrambling to get to the bottom of this after a few remarks. He just let that shit glide. OP. You don't think I've talked to her about this? I am shut down every time. I exploded after begging her to talk to me for the 100th time. This was not out of nowhere. I have literally gotten on my knees in front of her and asked why she is doing this. If there is a reason, what does her therapist say? Do you want to go to therapy together? And she says she doesn't know what I'm talking about. It is the most frustrating, infuriating thing. It's so hard to watch something so special pass by you and pretend it's not happening. I regret what I said and don't expect sympathy. But my explosion was not from lack of trying update. It's been about a month since I posted. This is a bit long because so many kind Redditors reached out and gave me advice and shared their experiences and asked for an update. After I posted and stewed for a little while, and had a couple of drinks, I called my Fiel. He and my wife are very close, and I respect his opinion. He has been married for a very long time, and seems to have a happy marriage and has good relationships all around with his family. I didn't specify what issues we were having, but he was over at my house while I was staying in an Airbnb, so it was no secret we were having problems. He has more of a traditional marriage, and at some point asked what I had to lose by putting pressure on her to talk. I said I feared I would push her away more, and he pretty much told me that I was living in a separate house than my pregnant wife, freaking out about a potential divorce. What did I have to lose? He advised me to be a man, and come back to my house and lay it on the line. I told him I'd be coming over the next day. They asked if they could take Leah to buy some sparklers for the upcoming holiday and spend the night at their house. I agreed, and when I went to my house the next day I came in with flowers and stuff to make dinner. My wife asked what I was doing there, to which I replied I live there and would like to sit down and talk. I gave a long apology for my actions and words. When I finished, I said it was her turn to tell me what was going on. She tried to claim nothing, that everything was okay. After a while, I said my heart is broken, that we have been through some tough things together, fought for each other, and now you sit here and lie to my face. We both sat there and she cried for about 30 minutes until eventually she said she felt like our relationship would end if she was honest. I said I would hear her out, no matter what. She admitted it was hard that this would be her first kid and not mine. She didn't think it would bother her and it didn't until she was pregnant, and that she laid in bed at night thinking if my ex would have wanted to raise Leah we would still be a family together and she wouldn't matter. She expressed that seeing me emotional about our baby, or wanting to touch her bump, or treat her made her think of me and my ex and how I had already did all of the things she was excited to do with me. Near the beginning of her pregnancy, She had told a close friend that she couldn't wait to have a baby with her soulmate, and her friend replied that she didn't think soulmates had other children or baby mamas, that it was two people meant only for each other. She was very upset and asked if I thought we were soulmates like she did. She described herself and our unborn child as my sloppy seconds family, that no one grew up dreaming of having kids by multiple different people. That she was just the substitute when the family I wanted didn't work out. She also shared she had found some old images of my ex on social media and could not stop comparing her pregnant body. She feared the baby wouldn't be an equal to Leah in my eyes. It worried her when I would ask what she thought the baby would be like, that what if the baby was disabled, or didn't like to do the things we enjoyed as a family, or the baby and Elle didn't like each other. She said at one point she found herself wishing I had never had Leah, so she wouldn't have to worry as much, and that is when she knew she had to really put in the extra effort to maintain a relationship with Leah. She feared that between work and Leah, I wouldn't have time and wouldn't bond with the baby, like in the article she read online where fathers didn't bond with their children until they were able to do things with the family. When I did try and bond with the baby, she worried the baby wouldn't live up to Leah. I have never been shy about saying how much being a father means to me and how raising Leah has been the highlight of my life, along with marrying my wife and now having our child together. She said it was initially what made her confident in marrying me and excited to have a big family with me. But now constantly wondered if her pregnancy and this baby would be a highlight or a burden for me, because the stress is the same but the newness wasn't, and then what if a newborn and then toddler wouldn't be as interesting to me as Leah, who is capable of doing activities. She showed me a million articles of different men explaining they didn't bond with their children until 4+ years old. She also showed me videos where people say things they did with their first kid, and then get more relaxed as they have more children. She said it freaked her out because it was clear people stopped caring the more children they had. She said that there were times she felt she was ruining our family and coming between me and Leah. For example, at the zoo she said she cried on the way to the hospital. She was afraid Leah would hate her and resent the baby for cutting our zoo time short, and that I would be upset that I was spending my time off work at the hospital instead of doing the activities we planned with Leah. While I work, Leah and my wife spend a lot of time out of the house, library, local parks, etc. One of their favorite activities is biking together, and we bike together on weekends as well. We have lots of local trails, but due to her pregnancy she has not been able to. We've been doing more indoor activities. My wife said that when I'm at work, Leah kept saying she hated her because she didn't get to go on her new bike as often anymore. I said I would discuss it with her, because that is unacceptable. My wife asked me not to since there would be so many changes soon for Leah, and it hurt her because she missed biking together as well. A couple of months ago, my wife asked me and Leah if we wanted to read stories together. Leah chose the first story I read and my wife chose the second, her favorite childhood story, for me to read to the baby and Leah, since it helps promote brain activity and help with bonding. After that, I read another book of Leah's choosing. While I was at work the next day, Leah ripped the pages out of the book my wife chose. She said she was going to tell me, but her friend, the same friend who says we aren't soulmates, said I would think she was making it up and that it seemed to her she was trying to become between me and Leah. I asked her why she didn't tell me any of this, and she explained that she didn't feel comfortable telling me because her thoughts didn't even make sense to her. She wanted me to spend time with Leah so she didn't feel left out or jealous, and when I did she felt upset I wasn't spending more time with her. She loves Leah but wishes we had our first kid together. She wants me around but also feels upset and guilty when I give her/our unborn baby attention. She said she feared that I would think she was trying to come between me and Leah, when she wasn't. By the time I realized something was truly wrong and started to ask what was wrong, if she needed therapy, etc., she said she realized she was acting poorly, but didn't want to admit to herself that she missed out on a lot with me and doubled down as it was hard to face that she made her fears reality by pushing me away and not letting me care. And that she couldn't start over, that her first pregnancy was a somewhat bad experience because of her own actions. At this point, I realized how terrible I'd been. I apologized for making her feel like she couldn't come to me about anything. She said when she researched her feelings she found a bunch of forums where people were calling the poster evil for their feelings about their stepchild, and feared I would feel the same. She said if I had told her I felt about Leah the way she felt about Leah, that it would make her angry and upset, so she couldn't see how I wouldn't be. We both cried for a long time. I tried to reassure her. I told her how much I loved her. How excited I was, that she was the family of my choosing and my soulmate, that the universe knew that Leah and I needed her, which is why circumstances allowed us to be a family. She apologized for the way she treated me, and said she wanted to make it right. She said she had wanted to apologize when I was beginning to have my meltdown, but was surprised when I yelled, and realized she might have messed up beyond repair to get that reaction from me. We continued to cry for a long time, and she asked if I wanted to feel the baby. Of course I said yes, and we cried even more. It turned out to be a great evening. I made us dinner and we laughed about how I was so stressed I went to Reddit for advice. She wanted to read the post and cried again when she did. I reassured her we could move past this, and she said she felt less horrible as she read some of the comments from women in her shoes. It was a bit awkward the first week, after so many months of tension. I knew things were turning around when she woke me up by whispering baby wants blueberry pancakes that Saturday. I don't think I've ever prepared pancakes so fast, I couldn't keep the smile off my face. We ended up going to a pool party a few days later, and she let me choose her swimsuit, a big deal for someone who only wore baggy clothes around me. We took family pictures, and the universe is clearly on my side because on the way home she asked me to feel her belly and our baby was hiccuping, something I had never felt before, and it was the first we could share together. She has even let me help her when she is sick without making an excuse about Leah. I've learned that when she comes and puts her back to me and lifts her arm, that is my cue to lift her belly up. I now spend a lot of time rubbing and talking to her belly, and rubbing her feet, legs, back, shoulders, hips, haha, she is sore everywhere at this point. The first 500 times it made me cry. It has been such a relief to be involved. I never thought being tasked with acquiring the most random food items at 2 a.m. would be a great time for me, but it is. It still sucks that I missed out on a lot. I think it sucks for her too. She gets emotional and says a weight has been lifted off of her and things are so much easier, and she is upset that she didn't talk to me sooner. I have been working to fix some of my wife's guilt. I realized there were a lot of simple fixes. For example, I was able to go to my local bike shop and get a pull behind the trailer. Now, I pull her in that and she can use a small fan and ice packs, and Leah can ride her bike. I have taken off work so I can spend more time with them both. We are all in therapy, and thankfully Leah's therapist is continuing to say she is securely attached to both of us, enjoys the time we spend together, is coping very well. Some of her behavior was due to another situation, which we have resolved, and she is excited to be a big sister. My wife was terrified that maybe she could sense her attitude shift, but her therapist says that she only has one complaint about my wife, that she forgot her candy one time and then it took 32 whole minutes for the store to deliver it. My wife is in therapy working to overcome the negative feelings she has. That is pretty much where we are now. We are getting very close to baby time and working hard to finish preparing. My wife still needs reassurance. There are a lot of times she brings up my ex, and I've found bringing up our first helps. For example, she will ask about certain things and how it was for me. I'll say I don't want to talk about that, and steer the conversation to us. Do you remember our first house? First vacation? First kiss? Date? Remember that time blah blah? It made me fall more in love with you. Do you remember when you and Leah made me blah? That is still one of my prized possessions. It upsets me that my wife suffered for so long. I believe saying it out loud took a lot of power away from her feelings. I think most people know how badly it feels when you have thoughts that don't feel like your own when you're going through a mentally taxing time. I really should have stood up for our relationship and her mental health way sooner. I accepted her brushing me off for far too long when I should have realized she needed help. I appreciate everyone who reached out or offered advice. I posted this in detail with my wife's permission. She hopes that it helps someone out there struggling with the same feelings she felt. TLDR, my wife was facing insecurity and some mental health issues and did not feel she could reach out to me as they involved my bio daughter. Thankfully, Elle received great advice from my FIL and you all, and we spoke about it and worked it out. After some awkward times, things are somewhat back to normal and I'm able to be involved in my wife's pregnancy. Everyone, including Leah, is doing well and excited for the baby to arrive. Relevant comment. Commenter, I wonder, how is your wife moving forward regarding her friend? It seems she didn't even consider having these insecurities before she had a snake in her ear. OP, we have disinvited this friend from our home. It's hard to cut her out as she is part of my wife's larger friend group. My wife was unsure as this friend has gone through some hard things lately. However, recently my wife hosted a girls' night and her friends were arriving as I was leaving. I told her she looked beautiful and wished them a good time. When I arrived back, my wife told me this friend said in front of the whole group that I may be saying kind things to her now, but after some changes after birth I won't describe here, I will be after her. My wife said that was an unkind and untrue thing to say, and she said it was a joke. I made it very clear to my wife that I did not want her around, as we are in an emotionally vulnerable time and this person clearly does not wish us well, and she agreed.